Thunder crashed through the San Diego sky as Christopher Warren burst through the hospital's emergency doors, his tailored suit soaked from the downpour. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his face as he ran down the sterile corridors, his designer shoes squeaking against the polished floor. Mr. Warren, a nurse called out, trying to keep pace with him. "She's in room 204. They're preparing for emergency surgery." His mind flashed back to 3 hours ago, the phone call that shattered his board meeting. Judy had collapsed at school, her small body crumpling during lunch break. Then Shirley, rushing from her second job, her own condition deteriorating as she tried to reach her daughter. The memories of another rainy night 5 years ago threatened to overwhelm him. Different hospital, different faces, same gut-wrenching fear. He reached room 204, his hand trembling as he pushed open the door. 8-year-old Judy lay unconscious, her usually bright face pale against the white hospital sheets. Machines beeped steadily around her, their rhythmic sounds a cruel reminder of how fragile life could be. Shirley sat beside her daughter's bed, her own hospital gown a stark contrast to her nurse's uniform hanging nearby. Her hands shook as she stroked Judy's hair, tears streaming down her face. She looked up as Christopher entered, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and despair. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. I couldn't protect her. Just like I couldn't save them that night." Christopher moved forward, his own chest tight with emotion. "Don't," he said softly. "Not now. We need to focus on Judy." A doctor rushed in, his face grave. "Ms. Mitchell, your condition is critical. We need to operate on you immediately. But Judy also needs emergency intervention. The complications." "Save my daughter," Shirley interrupted, her voice firm despite her weakness. "Please, she's all I have." Christopher stepped forward, memories of another impossible choice flooding back. "No," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "We save them both. Whatever it costs, whatever it takes. I won't let another family be torn apart. Not again. Not here. Not here. Not tonight." Lightning flashed outside the window, illuminating the room in stark white light. In that brief moment, Christopher saw his past, present, and future converge in the faces of Shirley and Judy Mitchell. This time he wouldn't let go. This time he would fight for the family he never knew he needed. Inside his penthouse office overlooking San Diego's glittering skyline, Christopher Warren stood motionless before the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 42, he had achieved everything society deemed successful. Warren Enterprises dominated the real estate and development market. His net worth exceeded billions, and his influence stretched across multiple industries. Yet the reflection staring back at him in the darkened glass seemed hollow, a shell of the man he once was. 5 years ago, life had been different. The photos still sitting in his desk drawer told that story. Christopher with his wife Sarah, their faces bright with laughter as they watched their daughter Emma's 4th birthday party. Sarah, with her infectious smile and brilliant mind, had been his rock since their college days at Stanford. Together they had built Warren Enterprises from the ground up, sharing every triumph and setback. Emma had been their miracle, born after years of trying, bringing pure joy into their lives with her curious nature and endless questions about the world. That rainy October night changed everything. While Christopher stayed late at the office closing a crucial deal, Sarah and Emma were driving home from a school recital. The roads were slick, visibility poor. A drunk driver crossed the median. The police said death was instantaneous, a small mercy, they called it. Christopher arrived at the hospital too late, only to find empty shells where his family had been. The following months passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, police reports, and soul-crushing silence in their family home. Christopher threw himself into work with renewed ferocity, as if building more towers and closing bigger deals could somehow fill the void his family left behind. He moved into the penthouse office, unable to face the echoes of happiness in their house. Every achievement felt meaningless, every celebration hollow. His closest advisors watched with growing concern as Christopher transformed into someone they barely recognized. The man who once prioritized community development now focused solely on profit margins. Board meetings that used to include discussions about social impact now centered entirely on market dominance. He worked 18-hour days, skipped holidays, and avoided any situation that might trigger memories of his past life. Harold Bennett, Sarah's younger brother and Christopher's VP of operations, seemed to be the only one who could still reach him. They shared the same loss, the same pain. Harold had idolized his sister, and losing her devastated him equally. Their grief became a silent bond, understanding what others couldn't. Together they drove the company to new heights, though their methods grew increasingly aggressive. But the media labeled Christopher the Ice King of San Diego real estate, a nickname that amused him with its accuracy. He had indeed frozen his heart, letting nothing and no one penetrate the walls he'd built around himself. Charity galas that he once attended with Sarah became obligations to be endured. The children's hospital wing they had planned together remained an unused blueprint in his office drawer. His daily routine became a carefully orchestrated dance of meetings, contracts, and strategic planning, leaving no room for reflection or emotion. The only deviation came during his late-night walks through Balboa Park, where the quiet darkness matched his internal landscape. These solitary wanderings were his sole concession to the human need for peace, though they brought little comfort. The company's success continued to soar. Warren Enterprises expanded into new markets, acquired struggling competitors, and reshaped the city's skyline. Christopher's personal fortune multiplied, earning him spots on prestigious lists and invitations to exclusive circles. He accepted it all with detached indifference, knowing none of it could restore what he'd lost. His executive assistant, Maria, had worked with him since the company's early days. She remembered the old Christopher, the man who knew every employee's name, who celebrated their successes and supported them through hardships. Now she watched him move through life like a ghost, present but never truly there. She kept Sarah and Emma's photos on her desk, a quiet reminder of the man her boss used to be. The only time Christopher showed any hint of his former self was during the annual scholarship ceremony at Emma's former school. He had established the fund in her memory, providing full rides to gifted students who shared her love of science and art. During these ceremonies, those who knew him well could catch a glimpse of the pain he carried, visible in the slight tremor of his hands as he handed out the certificates. As Warren Enterprises approached its 15-year anniversary, plans were made for a grand celebration. The business media buzzed with speculation about new acquisitions and market expansions. Christopher approved the arrangements without interest, seeing it as just another performance in his role as successful CEO. The man who had once dreamed of creating lasting value for his community now measured success solely in stock prices and profit margins. The morning of our story's beginning, Christopher had reviewed the latest proposal for developing a low-income neighborhood into luxury condominiums. 5 years ago, he would have rejected it immediately, considering the impact on local families. Now, he simply calculated the potential return on investment and signed his approval. The old Christopher Warren was buried as surely as his family, leaving behind a man who had everything and nothing at the same time. Yet fate has a way of disrupting even the most carefully constructed facades. As Christopher stood in his office that evening, watching the sun set over the city he helped build, he had no way of knowing that his carefully ordered world was about to be shaken to its core. A chance encounter in Balboa Park would soon force him to confront the very emotions he'd spent 5 years suppressing, leading him down a path that would challenge everything he'd become. In the quiet hours before dawn, Shirley Mitchell pulled her worn Honda into the parking lot of San Diego General Hospital, where she now worked as a cleaning staff member. The irony wasn't lost on her 5 years ago. She had walked these same halls as one of the hospital's most promising emergency room nurses. Now, she cleaned the very rooms where she once saved lives. That fateful rainy night remained etched in her memory. She had been the charge nurse in the ER when they brought in the Warren family. Sarah Warren, already beyond help, and little Emma, whose hand Shirley had held until the final moment. She had worked desperately with her team, trying everything possible to save them, but sometimes even the best medical care wasn't enough. The look in Christopher Warren's eyes when he arrived too late haunted her dreams for months afterward. The guilt and trauma took their toll. Night after night, Shirley relived those moments, questioning every decision, every action. Could she have done something different? Should she have tried another approach? The what-ifs consumed her until she could no longer function effectively in the ER. After several near mistakes with other patients, she made the heartbreaking decision to resign from her nursing position. Life had already been challenging as a single mother, but at least her nursing salary had provided a comfortable life for her and Judy. Her daughter's father had abandoned them before Judy was born, leaving Shirley to handle everything alone. Still, they had managed. Judy attended a good school, had her own room in their small but cozy apartment, and never went hungry. Now at 36, Shirley worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. During the day, she worked as a clerk at a local pharmacy, and at night she cleaned the hospital where she once practiced medicine. The pay barely covered their basic needs, but Shirley was determined to keep Judy in her current school, even if it meant surviving on coffee and discount groceries. Their apartment had downsized to a 1-bedroom unit in a less desirable neighborhood. Shirley slept on the pull-out couch, insisting Judy take the bedroom. The walls were thin, the plumbing temperamental, but Shirley had managed to create a warm home atmosphere with second-hand furniture and cheerful decorations from dollar stores. Photos of Judy's achievements covered one wall: honor roll certificates, art contest awards, and science fair ribbons. The first signs of her illness appeared gradually. Unexplained fatigue, joint pain, and recurring fevers that she dismissed as stress and overwork. Being a former nurse, Shirley recognized the symptoms of something more serious, but without health insurance, she couldn't afford proper medical care. She self-medicated with over-the-counter pills and pushed through the pain, knowing Judy depended on her. Her co-workers at the pharmacy noticed her declining health. Martha, the head pharmacist, often urged her to see a doctor, offering to help with the costs. But Shirley's pride and independence made her resist. She had always been the caregiver, never the patient. The thought of accepting charity, even from friends, felt like admitting defeat. The hospital cleaning job provided an unexpected connection to her past life. Sometimes, during quiet moments, she would pause in the ER, remembering the rush of saving lives, the satisfaction of helping others. Several of the older nurses recognized her, their eyes filled with mixture of pity and concern. They remembered her as the dedicated nurse who had won the hospital's Excellence in Care Award 3 years running. Despite their reduced circumstances, Shirley maintained high hopes for Judy's future. Every month, she put aside a small amount in a college fund, even if it meant skipping meals herself. She helped Judy with homework, encouraged her interest in science, and tried to shield her from the harsh realities of their financial situation. When Judy expressed interest in becoming a doctor, Shirley's heart swelled with both pride and worry. Pride in her daughter's aspirations, worry about the cost of medical school. Their weekend routine became a careful balance of budget management. They explored free community events, spent hours in the public library, and turned grocery shopping into mathematical games to teach Judy about budgeting. Their special treat was monthly visits to Balboa Park, where they would pack homemade sandwiches and pretend they were having a fancy picnic. The park became their sanctuary, a place where they could momentarily forget their struggles. Judy would play on the swings while Shirley watched, treasuring her daughter's laughter. Sometimes they would make up stories about the other park visitors, imagining grand adventures and happy endings. These moments of joy helped balance the increasing difficulty of their daily life. As her condition worsened, Shirley found it harder to maintain their careful routine. The joint pain made it difficult to stand during her pharmacy shifts. Night sweats left her exhausted during the hospital cleaning rounds. She started taking more breaks, moving slower, fighting to keep going through sheer determination. Her supervisor at the hospital, remembering her nursing days, turned a blind eye to these unauthorized rest periods. The turning point came when Shirley nearly collapsed while restocking shelves at the pharmacy. Martha insisted on running basic blood tests, using her own lab account. The results confirmed Shirley's worst fears: her condition was serious and would require extensive treatment. That night, holding Judy close as they watched TV on their worn couch, Shirley fought back tears, wondering how much longer she could keep their fragile world from falling apart. The morning of our story's beginning, Shirley had woken up with severe pain throughout her body. Still, she got Judy ready for school, packed her lunch with the last of their groceries, and somehow made it through her pharmacy shift. The hospital cleaning cart felt heavier than usual as she started her night rounds, her hands shaking as she tried to maintain her grip on reality and responsibility. Little did she know that fate was about to intervene, bringing her face to face with a past she thought she'd left behind. The chance encounter in Balboa Park would set in motion events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about strength, pride, and the true meaning of family. At 8 years old, Judy Mitchell saw the world differently than most children her age. While her classmates at Lincoln Elementary School complained about having to eat their vegetables or not getting the latest toys, Judy worried about the dark circles under her mother's eyes and the way she winced when she thought no one was watching. Small for her age, with bright brown eyes and unruly dark curls that refused to stay in their ribbons, Judy possessed an old soul's wisdom wrapped in a child's boundless optimism. Her teachers often remarked on the strange combination of innocence and maturity she displayed, doing extra credit work to make her mother proud while secretly sharing her lunch with classmates who had none of their own. Every morning, Judy woke up before her alarm, quietly getting ready for school so her mother could sleep a few extra precious minutes. She had memorized their morning routine, lay out her uniform, pack her backpack, and warm up the last of yesterday's coffee for her mom. The other kids might have their fancy breakfast cereals, but Judy took pride in being her mother's little helper. In class, she sat in the front row, absorbing every word her teachers said. Science was her favorite subject, especially when they studied the human body. During these lessons, she would think about her mother's old stories of working in the emergency room, saving lives and helping people. Her notebook margins filled with drawings of hospitals, doctors, and nurses, alongside careful notes about how the heart pumped blood and why people got sick. The reality of their financial situation didn't escape Judy's notice. She saw how her mother stretched every dollar, carefully cutting coupons and shopping at discount stores. When her shoes started wearing out, Judy colored the scuff marks with markers rather than asking for new ones. Birthday parties became increasingly rare among her classmates as their neighborhood changed, but Judy never complained about not having her own celebrations. At school, things weren't always easy. Amanda Cooper, whose father owned a local car dealership, led a group of girls who targeted Judy for wearing second-hand uniforms and carrying a worn backpack held together with safety pins. They mockingly called her Goodwill Girl and excluded her from their games during recess. But Judy held her head high, remembering her mother's words about true strength coming from within. Her safe haven was the school library, where Mrs. Reynolds, the elderly librarian, recognized a kindred spirit in the quiet girl who devoured medical books meant for much older students. During lunch breaks, Judy would help shelve books in exchange for being allowed to read the more advanced texts. She dreamed of understanding enough to help her mother get better, though she didn't fully comprehend the complexity of her mother's illness. The weekends in Balboa Park were Judy's favorite times. Despite their limited means, her mother made these outings feel magical. They would pack simple sandwiches and pretend they were having high tea like the ladies in the books they read together. Judy loved watching other families creating stories about their lives and sometimes drawing them in her sketchbook, a birthday gift from her mother's co-worker at the pharmacy. Her most treasured possession was an old teddy bear named Dr. Beans, dressed in scrubs her mother had sewn from discarded hospital uniforms. Dr. Beans became her confidant, patient, and practiced subject as she played at being a doctor. She would carefully wrap his paw in bandages from their dwindling first aid kit, diagnosing various imaginative ailments with the seriousness of a seasoned physician. At night, when she was supposed to be sleeping, Judy often crept to her bedroom door to watch her mother. She saw how Shirley would sit at their small kitchen table, surrounded by bills and budget notebooks, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. During these moments, Judy would whisper promises to her mother's turned-back promises to become a doctor, to make enough money so her mother would never have to work again, to make everything better. The other students had no idea that Judy spent her evenings helping her mother clean offices or organizing shelves at the pharmacy. She treated these tasks like adventures, making games out of sorting papers and arranging medicine bottles by color and size. The night security guards at various buildings came to know her as the little girl who would leave them drawings and ask about their families. Despite their circumstances, Judy maintained an infectious optimism that touched everyone around her. When Mr. Garcia, the janitor at her school, lost his wife, Judy noticed his sadness and began leaving him encouraging notes with her childish drawings. When old Mrs. Peterson from their apartment building had trouble carrying her groceries, Judy would run down 4 flights of stairs to help, refusing any offered rewards. Her teachers noticed how she would gather discarded pencils and half-used notebooks, carefully erasing old marks to reuse them. Instead of seeing this as a sign of poverty, they admired her resourcefulness and environmental consciousness. Ms. Thompson, her science teacher, often saved laboratory specimens and extra worksheets specifically for Judy's curious mind. But beneath her brave exterior, Judy carried deep fears. She noticed how her mother's hands shook more frequently, how she needed longer rests between tasks, how the medicine bottles in their bathroom cabinet multiplied. During class presentations about family, Judy would proudly describe her mother's former career as a nurse, but her voice would quaver slightly when classmates asked about her father. The morning of our story's beginning started like any other. Judy had helped her mother prepare for work, pretending not to notice how long it took her to button her uniform. During lunch break, while sitting alone on her usual bench near the playground, she felt a strange dizziness overcome her. The world tilted sideways, and the last thing she remembered was wondering who would take care of her mother if something happened to her. What Judy didn't know was that her collapse would set in motion a chain of events that would change not only her life but the lives of everyone around her. The same park where she spent countless happy weekends would become the setting for a meeting that would redefine her understanding of family, love, and the true meaning of wealth. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Balboa Park as Christopher Warren took his usual evening walk. The board meeting had been particularly draining, with Harold pushing for more aggressive expansion into low-income neighborhoods. Even now, hours later, the tension lingered in his shoulders as fallen leaves crunched beneath his Italian leather shoes. He hadn't planned to come to the park that evening. His regular route took him through the sterile, well-lit business district, where glass towers reflected his empire's success. But something, perhaps the weight of the day's decisions, or the approaching anniversary of his family's death, had drawn him to this more human corner of the city. The sound caught his attention first, a soft, muffled sobbing that seemed out of place among the cheerful shouts of children playing nearby. Christopher's first instinct was to walk past, to maintain the careful distance he built between himself and others' emotions. But the sound followed him, tugging at memories he'd fought hard to suppress. Near a weathered bench partially hidden by overgrown bushes, he found its source. A small girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, sat hunched over with her face buried in her hands. Her school uniform was wrinkled, and a worn backpack lay forgotten at her feet. Something about her posture, the absolute desolation in her tiny frame, stopped him in his tracks. "Are you all right?" The words left his mouth before he could stop them. his voice rusty from a day of harsh business negotiations. The girl looked up, and Christopher felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Large brown eyes, red-rimmed from crying, met his with a familiar intensity that sent a jolt through his chest. For a moment he saw Emma's face superimposed over this stranger's features. I can't find my mom," the girl hiccuped, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "We were supposed to meet by the fountain after school, but she wasn't there, and I waited and waited and waited." Fresh tears threatened to spill over as her voice trailed off. Christopher found himself kneeling beside the bench, his $1,000 suit gathering park dust. "I'm Christopher," he said gently, surprising himself with the softness in his tone. "What's your name?" "Judy," she whispered, clutching a rather worn teddy bear dressed in makeshift medical scrubs. "Judy Mitchell. Mom's never late. Never. Something must be wrong." The fear in her voice struck a chord deep within Christopher's carefully constructed walls. "We'll find her together," he heard himself promise. "Can you tell me what she looks like?" As Judy described her mother, brown hair, blue uniform, always wearing a silver heart necklace, Christopher pulled out his phone to alert park security. But before he could make the call, Judy's next words froze him in place. "She works 2 jobs," the girl continued, pride mixing with worry in her voice. "She used to be a nurse at the big hospital, but now she works at Wilson's Pharmacy and cleans offices at night. She says it's temporary, until she gets better." Images flashed through Christopher's mind: a different hospital, a different night, a different nurse's determined face as she fought to save his family. He pushed the memories away, focusing on the child before him. "Which hospital did your mother work at, Judy?" "San Diego General. She was the best nurse there. She won awards and everything. But then something bad happened, and she couldn't be a nurse anymore. She doesn't talk about it, but sometimes I hear her crying at night." Christopher's throat tightened. The coincidence seemed impossible, yet somehow inevitable. He remembered the nurse who had stayed with Emma until the end, who had fought desperately to save them both. Her name had been in the reports, in the letters of condolence he'd never answered. Mitchell. Shirley Mitchell. Standing slowly, Christopher offered his hand to Judy. "Let's walk around the park. Maybe we'll spot her." The small hand that slipped into his sent another wave of memories crashing through his defenses. How many times had Emma held his hand just like this, trusting him completely to keep her safe? They walked the winding paths, Judy's steps becoming more uncertain with each passing minute. She clutched her teddy bear, Dr. Beans. She'd informed him seriously while scanning the crowds for her mother. Christopher found himself studying her more closely, noting the careful mending on her uniform, the way she carried herself with a dignity beyond her years. "Mum's been really tired lately," Judy confided as they circled back toward the fountain. "She thinks I don't notice, but her hands shake sometimes, and she has to sit down a lot. I try to help. I get ready for school by myself and help clean at the pharmacy after homework. But I'm worried about her." The simple honesty in her words cut through years of carefully maintained emotional distance. Christopher recognized in Judy the same helpless concern he'd felt watching Sarah battle through long nights of work and study in their early years. But where he had been able to eventually provide comfort and security for his wife, this child could only watch her mother struggle alone. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow across the park, Christopher's phone finally rang. The park security officer's voice was tense. "Mr. Warren, we've located Ms. Mitchell. She's been taken to San Diego General. Apparently she collapsed at her pharmacy job." Before he could finish, Judy's own phone, an old model held together with tape, buzzed with a text. Her face paled as she read it. "Mom's in the hospital," she whispered, fear making her voice tremble. "Mrs. Martha from the pharmacy says it's serious, but I don't know how to get there." Christopher straightened, years of decisive action taking over. "I'll take you," he said firmly. "My car's just outside the park." Then, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes, he added more gently, "I promise you're safe with me. We'll find your mom together." As they walked to his car, Judy's small hand still trustingly in his, Christopher felt something shift inside him. The carefully constructed walls he'd built around his heart began to crack, letting in emotions he'd thought long buried. In trying to help this lost child find her mother, he was unknowingly finding his way back to his own humanity. The emergency room at San Diego General Hospital hummed with controlled chaos as Christopher and Judy rushed through the sliding doors. The familiar antiseptic smell and harsh fluorescent lighting transported Christopher back 5 years, but he pushed the memories aside, focusing on the small hand clutching his. Martha Thompson, the head pharmacist from Wilson's, was waiting for them in the reception area. Her usually neat appearance showed signs of distress, wisps of grey hair escaping her bun, worry lines deepening around her eyes. "Thank goodness you're here, Judy," she said, enveloping the girl in a quick hug before turning to Christopher with a questioning look. "Christopher Warren," he introduced himself briefly. "I found Judy in the park. What happened to her mother?" Martha's expression grew grave. Shirley collapsed during her shift. She's been hiding how sick she really is, refusing to take time off or see a doctor. Today she was restocking shelves when she just crumpled. Her fever was dangerously high, and her joints were so swollen she could barely move. Judy pressed closer to Christopher's side, her small face pale with fear. A nurse approached them, clipboard in hand. "Are you MS? Mitchell's family?" she asked, glancing between the adults. Before anyone could respond, Dr. James Chen emerged from the treatment area, his surgical scrubs bearing evidence of a long day. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Christopher. "Mr. Warren? I didn't expect." He caught himself, turning to address Judy instead. "Your mom is very sick, sweetheart. We're doing everything we can to help her." "What's wrong with her?" Judy's voice trembled, but she stood straight, trying to be brave. Dr. Chen knelt to her level, his manner gentle but serious. "Your mother has a condition that's been getting worse because she hasn't been able to get proper treatment. Her immune system, the part of her body that fights illness, is attacking her own tissues. The good news is we can treat it, but she'll need extensive care and medication." Christopher listened as Dr. Chen outlined Shirley's condition, the months of ignored symptoms, the complications from lack of treatment, the urgent need for specialized care. Each detail painted a picture of a proud woman sacrificing her own health to provide for her daughter. "The immediate concern is the inflammation around her heart," Dr. Chen continued, now addressing Christopher directly. "She needs to start treatment immediately," but without insurance he left the sentence hanging, the implication clear. "Cost is not an issue," Christopher stated firmly. "Whatever she needs, I'll cover it." He felt Judy's hand tighten in his, her eyes wide with hope and disbelief. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical terms and administrative procedures. Christopher signed papers, made calls, and arranged for Shirley to be moved to a private room. Throughout it all, Judy remained by his side, her presence anchoring him to the present, preventing him from drowning in memories of another night in this same hospital. Finally, they were allowed to see Shirley. She lay pale against the white hospital sheets, various monitors beeping steadily around her. IVs snaked from her arms, delivering medications that should have been started months ago. Judy rushed to her mother's side, careful not to disturb any of the medical equipment. "Mom," she whispered, taking her mother's hand. Shirley's eyes fluttered open, focusing first on her daughter, then widening as they landed on Christopher. "You," she breathed, recognition and something else, guilt. Fear crossing her face. "Mr. Warren, I." "Save your strength," Christopher interrupted gently. "We can talk later. Right now you need to focus on getting better." A nurse entered to check Shirley's vitals, frowning slightly at the readings. "Dr. Chen wants to start you on immunosuppressants right away," she explained, adjusting one of the IV bags. "The next few hours will be critical." Judy climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed, still clutching Dr. Beans. "I'll stay with you, Mum. Dr. Beans can help make you better. He's a very good doctor." Shirley managed a weak smile, but her face soon contorted with pain. The monitors began beeping more urgently, and the nurse quickly ushered Judy and Christopher out of the room as more medical staff rushed in. In the hallway, Judy's brave facade finally cracked. "Is my mum going to die?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. Christopher knelt before her, gripping her shoulders gently. "No," he said with a conviction that surprised him. "I promise you, Judy, we're going to make sure your mom gets better. I know these doctors, they're the best, and they're going to take excellent care of her." Arthur, who had stayed to help with paperwork, approached them. "Judy needs somewhere to stay tonight," she said quietly to Christopher. "I'd take her, but my apartment building doesn't allow children." "She'll stay with me," Christopher decided, surprising himself again. "I have plenty of room, and she should be close to the hospital." He looked at Judy. "Would that be okay?" "Just until your mom is better." Judy nodded, exhaustion finally showing on her young face. As they gathered her backpack and Dr. Bean's, Christopher caught Dr. Chen in the hallway. "I want updates every hour," he instructed. "And I mean every hour, no matter what time it is." The doctor nodded, understanding the steel behind the request. "We're starting her on aggressive treatment. The next 24 hours will tell us a lot about her chances." As Christopher led a tired Judy toward the parking lot, he felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on his shoulders. This time he wouldn't be too late. This time he would make sure a little girl didn't lose her mother. This time would be different. The drive to Christopher's penthouse apartment was quiet, with Judy finally succumbing to exhaustion in the back seat. Dr. Beans clutched tightly to her chest. Through the rearview mirror, Christopher watched her sleeping form, struck by how small and vulnerable she looked. The city lights flickered across her face, highlighting tear tracks that hadn't fully dried. Once home, he carried her sleeping form to his guest room, a space that had never been used, maintained in pristine condition by his housekeeper. As he carefully laid her on the bed, still fully clothed except for her shoes, a memory struck him with physical force, carrying Emma to bed after she'd fallen asleep during movie nights, Sarah turning down the covers ahead of him. Standing in the doorway, watching Judy sleep, Christopher felt the careful compartments of his life beginning to blur. His phone buzzed constantly, Harold demanding to know why he'd missed the evening's merger meeting, his assistant reminding him about tomorrow's board presentation. Dr. Chen's promised hourly updates on Shirley's condition, but for the first time in 5 years, the business empire he'd built seemed secondary to the human drama unfolding before him. In his home office, Christopher sat behind his desk and began making calls. First to his personal lawyer, instructing him to set up a medical trust for Shirley's treatment. Then to the hospital's administrative office, arranging for her transfer to their top specialists. Each call was precise, decisive, the actions of a man used to making things happen through sheer force of will and wealth. But as the night deepened, his thoughts kept returning to the woman fighting for her life in the hospital, the same woman who had fought to save his family years ago. He remembered her now, though he'd blocked out many details from that night. Her determined face as she performed CPR on Emma, her gentle voice as she told him it was time to say goodbye. Her tears mingling with his as she apologized for not being able to save them. A soft sound from the guest room pulled him from his memories. He found Judy sitting up in bed, disoriented and frightened in the unfamiliar space. "Mom," she called out, her voice small in the darkness. "She's at the hospital. Remember," Christopher said gently, turning on a bedside lamp. "You're safe here. Would you like some hot chocolate?" In his massive kitchen, Christopher realized he had no idea how to make hot chocolate. His housekeeper usually handled any food preparation, and he rarely ate at home anyway. After some searching, he found some instant packets in the back of a cupboard, probably left by his assistant during late work sessions. As they sat at his breakfast bar, Judy warming her hands around the steaming mug, Christopher studied her more carefully. Despite her exhaustion, she sat straight, her manners impeccable, a child used to acting more grown-up than her years. Your mum's going to have to stay in the hospital for a while, he explained carefully. Would you be okay staying here with me until she's better? We can visit her every day after school. Judy considered this, her face serious. But what about my uniform? And my homework? And who will feed Mr. Whiskers? Mr. Whiskers, the stray cat who lives behind our apartment. Mom says we can't have pets, but I save him bits of my lunch sometimes. Something squeezed in Christopher's chest. This child, with so little herself, sharing what she had with the stray cat. We'll go to your apartment tomorrow and get everything you need. And I'm sure we can find a way to help Mr. Whiskers too. Making another decision, Christopher pulled out his phone and sent a series of rapid texts. Within minutes, his assistant Maria responded, despite the late hour. He asked her to handle the necessary arrangements, contacting Judy's school, hiring a housekeeper who could cook proper meals, finding a tutor to help with homework, and coordinating with social services to ensure everything was legal and proper. Mr. Warren, Judy's voice was hesitant. Why are you helping us? You don't even know us. Christopher set down his phone, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes people come into our lives for a reason. Your mother once tried to help my family when we needed it most. Now it's my turn to help yours. Did she make them better? Your family. No, Christopher said softly, the truth still painful after all these years. Sometimes even the best doctors and nurses can't fix everything. But she tried her hardest, and she was there when we needed someone to care. Judy absorbed this, her young face thoughtful. Is that why you're sad? Because you lost your family? The direct question, delivered with a child's innocent perception, caught Christopher off guard. For a moment he couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. Finally he managed, yes, that's why I was sad. For a very long time. Mum says it's okay to be sad, but we shouldn't let it stop us from being kind. Judy set down her empty mug. Maybe that's why we met you in the park, so you could remember how to be kind again. Christopher stared at her, struck by the wisdom in her words. In that moment he made his final decision of the night, one that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone around him. Judy, he said seriously, I want you to know that I'm going to do everything in my power to help you and your mother, not just with the hospital bills or giving you a place to stay, but with everything. Your mother deserves a chance to get better. And you deserve a chance to just be a kid. Will you let me help? Judy studied him with those old soul eyes, then nodded solemnly. Okay, but you have to promise something too. What's that? Promise you'll let us help you too. Mom always says helping others is the best medicine for a sad heart. Christopher felt something shift inside him, as if a frozen river had finally begun to thaw. I promise, he said, and for the first time in 5 years he felt the ghost of a real smile touch his lips. The morning sun had barely touched the glass towers of downtown San Diego when Harold Bennett stormed into Christopher's office, his usually well-maintained appearance showing signs of strain. His tie was slightly askew, and dark circles shadowed his eyes, suggesting a sleepless night. Where the hell were you last night? Harold demanded, tossing a stack of papers onto Christopher's desk. The Sanderson merger meeting was crucial, and you just disappeared. The board members are furious. Christopher looked up from his laptop where he'd been reviewing Shirley's medical reports. Something more important came up, he said calmly. Family emergency. Harold's face darkened at the word family. Family? What family, Christopher? You haven't had a family since Sarah and Emma. He stopped abruptly, seeing the warning flash in Christopher's eyes. I don't owe you an explanation, Harold, Christopher replied, his voice cooling several degrees. The merger can wait. We need to discuss something else. First, he pulled up a series of financial reports on his screen. Can you explain why our development funds are being channeled through shell companies in the Cayman Islands? The color drained from Harold's face, replaced quickly by a flush of anger. You're having me investigated. The quarterly audit raised some red flags. I've been too hands-off lately, trusting you to handle things. That was my mistake. Christopher turned his laptop around, showing complicated financial trails. Here to explain why millions of dollars are disappearing into accounts controlled by Sanderson Industries. Harold's laugh was bitter. Finally paying attention, are you? Too busy playing savior to some cleaning lady and her brat to notice your company being stripped bare. Christopher's fingers tightened on his desk edge, but his voice remained steady. How long have you been working with Sanderson? How long have you been betraying everything we built? Betraying, Harold spat the word. You want to talk about betrayal? You betrayed Sarah the moment you chose that business meeting over her school recital. You betrayed Emma by not being there when she needed her father. You betrayed their memory by turning into this soulless corporate machine. Don't you dare use them against me, Christopher warned, standing slowly. Sarah was your sister, but she was my wife. Emma was my daughter. And you killed them, Harold's shout echoed through the office. You killed them with your ambition, your endless pursuit of success. If you'd been there that night instead of closing another deal. Get out, Christopher's voice was deadly quiet. Get out before I forget you're Sarah's brother. But Harold wasn't finished. He pulled another document from his briefcase. The board meets in an hour. I'm presenting evidence of your financial mismanagement and emotional instability. Taking in some random child. Throwing millions at unauthorized medical care. They'll vote you out by noon. Christopher felt an eerie calm settle over him. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? Using your position as Sarah's brother to deflect suspicion while you systematically undermined everything we built. Everything you built, you mean, Harold corrected bitterly. I was always in your shadow, even before you married Sarah. The brilliant Christopher Warren, turning everything he touched to gold. Well, now it's my turn. Sanderson offered me control of the merged company. By this time next week, Warren Enterprises will cease to exist. The intercom buzzed, and Maria's voice came through. Mr. Warren? The board members are gathering early. They're asking for you and Mr. Bennett. Christopher straightened his tie, a gesture that reminded him sharply of Sarah. She used to adjust it for him every morning. You've made one crucial mistake, Harold. You assumed I was still the same broken man I was 5 years ago. Save your speeches, Harold sneered. The evidence is irrefutable. Every questionable decision, every risky investment, all documented with your signature. The board will have no choice. As they walked toward the boardroom, Christopher's phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. Shirley's condition had stabilized overnight. Judy would be able to visit after school. The message strengthened his resolve. The boardroom fell silent as they entered. 12 faces turned to watch them, some confused, others openly hostile. Harold moved to the head of the table, confident in his victory. Ladies and gentlemen, Harold began, I've called this emergency meeting to address serious concerns about the company's direction. Actually, Christopher interrupted smoothly, I believe MS. Rodriguez has something to share first. Maria stepped forward, connecting her laptop to the presentation screen. Over the past 6 months, I've been gathering evidence of systematic fraud and corporate espionage, she began, bringing up detailed financial records. Mr. Bennett has been selling company secrets to Sanderson Industries while orchestrating a hostile takeover through offshore accounts. Harold's face went from red to white. You can't prove. But we can, Christopher said quietly. Every transaction, every leaked document, every secret meeting, all documented. The FBI is very interested in your creative accounting, Harold. They're probably in the lobby right now. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Harold lunged for the door but found his path blocked by security. As he was led away, he turned to Christopher one last time. She would have hated what you've become, he spat. Christopher watched his brother-in-law being escorted out, feeling no satisfaction, only a deep sadness. No, Harold, he said softly. Sarah would have hated what you've become. She believed in building things, not destroying them out of spite. Turning to the stunned board members, Christopher straightened his shoulders. Now, shall we discuss the company's true direction? I have some ideas about community development and medical outreach programs I'd like to propose. The aftermath of Harold's arrest sent shockwaves through the financial community. Within hours, Warren Enterprises stock began to plummet as news of the corporate scandal spread. This ACC launched a full investigation, freezing multiple accounts associated with the company, including the medical trust Christopher had established for Shirley's treatment. Standing in his office late that evening, Christopher watched the financial news networks dissect every aspect of the scandal. His phone hadn't stopped ringing, investors pulling out, partners distancing themselves, reporters demanding statements. But his mind was on the conversation he'd just had with the hospital's billing department. "I'm sorry, Mr. Warren," the administrator had said, her voice carefully neutral. "But with the accounts frozen, we can't continue the specialized treatment protocol. We'll provide basic care, of course, but the experimental medications." He'd tried using his personal accounts, only to discover that Harold's machinations ran deeper than anyone had suspected. Every major asset was temporarily locked pending investigation. The empire he'd built was still standing, but its resources were beyond his reach when he needed them most. Dr. Chen's latest update had been concerning. Without the specialized treatment, Shirley's condition would deteriorate rapidly. The standard medications weren't enough to control the aggressive autoimmune response. They needed the expensive experimental drugs, and they needed them soon. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Judy stood in the doorway, still in her school uniform, clutching Dr. Bean's. "Mr. Warren?" "The TV in the kitchen said something about your company being in trouble. Are we going to have to leave?" The innocent question hit him harder than any financial report. "No, Judy," he said firmly. "This is your home for as long as you need it. We just might have to make some adjustments for a while." But the reality was more complex than he could explain to an 8-year-old. His housekeeper had already quit, spooked by the scandal. The tutors he'd arranged for Judy were asking for payment in advance. Even the specialty pharmacy providing Shirley's medications was demanding cash up front. Making his way to the hospital that evening, Christopher found Shirley awake and alert, though the strain showed in her face. She'd seen the news too. "Christopher," she began, her voice weak but determined, "you have to stop spending money on me. I can't be responsible for making your situation worse." "This isn't your fault," he insisted, taking her hand. "Harold's actions. This is all temporary. Once the investigation clears me." "But how long will that take?" Shirley pressed. "I've seen my charts." Without the new treatment protocol, she left the sentence unfinished, but they both understood the implications. Later that night, after tucking Judy into bed with promises about visiting her mother tomorrow, Christopher sat in his home office making calls. He tried calling in old favors, approaching private investors, even considering selling his personal possessions. But Harold's betrayal had poisoned the well. No one wanted to risk association with Warren Enterprises until the investigation was complete. His assistant Maria worked through the night with him, trying to find creative solutions. They discovered that Harold's scheme had been more elaborate than initially thought. He'd systematically isolated the company's assets, creating a complex web that would take weeks, if not months, to untangle. "What about the children's hospital wing?" Maria suggested hesitantly. "The one you and Sarah planned? The funds are still in a separate foundation." Christopher shook his head. "That money's untouchable. It's Sarah's legacy. I won't use it for anything else." The next morning brought more bad news. The private school he'd enrolled Judy in was reconsidering her scholarship in light of recent events. The real estate agent handling Shirley's apartment lease called. They were terminating the agreement due to non-payment. Walking into the hospital, Christopher found Dr. Chen waiting with a grave expression. "Her numbers are dropping," he reported quietly. "Without the specialized medication, I'm not sure how long we can maintain her current condition." In Shirley's room, Judy sat doing homework, pretending not to notice how her mother's hand shook as she tried to hold a glass of water. The sight crystallized something in Christopher's mind. He'd lost one family to circumstances beyond his control. He wouldn't lose another to bureaucratic red tape. Stepping into the hallway, he made one final call to the one person who might understand what he was fighting for. Judge Eleanor Martinez had been Sarah's best friend since college. Now she sat on the federal bench. "It's about more than money, Eleanor," he explained, pacing the hospital corridor. "These regulations are designed to protect people, but right now they're hurting an innocent family. I need your help to expedite the review of at least some of the frozen accounts." "Christopher," her voice was gentle but firm, "you know I can't interfere with an ongoing investigation. I'm not asking you to clear everything, just the medical trust, just enough to keep her alive until this mess is sorted out." There was a long pause. "Send me the details," she finally said. "I'll see what I can do within the bounds of the law. But Christopher, this better not be another one of Harold's schemes." "It's not about business this time," he assured her. "It's about saving a family." Returning to Shirley's room, Christopher found Judy had fallen asleep in the chair, her math homework still open on her lap. Shirley watched him with knowing eyes. "You don't have to keep fighting for us," she whispered. "You've already done more than anyone could expect." Christopher took her hand, feeling the fever still burning beneath her skin. "5 years ago you fought to save my family. You stayed with my daughter until the end. Now it's my turn to fight for yours. Trust me, Shirley, we'll find a way." The media storm hit with devastating force. Local newspapers ran headlines screaming Warren Enterprises' empire, built on sand and billionaires' fall from Grace television crews, camped outside the corporate headquarters, eager to capture any hint of scandal. But it was the human impact that proved most painful to watch. At Lincoln Elementary, Judy faced the cruel reality of how quickly fortunes could change. Amanda Cooper, the car dealer's daughter who had always targeted her, now had new ammunition. "My dad says your guardian is a criminal," she announced loudly during lunch break. "He says Mr. Warren stole money, and now he's pretending to help you and your mom to look good." The whispers followed Judy through the hallways. Teachers who had been enthusiastically supportive of her fairy tale rescue now watched her with mixture of pity and suspicion. Even Mrs. Reynolds, the kindly librarian, seemed uncertain how to treat her. The hospital wasn't immune to the controversy either. Nurses who had warmly welcomed Shirley as a former colleague now spoke in hushed tones when they entered her room. Some patients requested transfers to different floors, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. The cleaning staff, Shirley's former co-workers, were forbidden from spending extra time chatting with her. Dr. Chen faced pressure from the hospital board about the resources being wasted on a charity case. They're questioning every test, every procedure he confided to Christopher during one of their daily updates. They're looking for any excuse to downgrade her care to basic coverage. At Wilson's pharmacy, Martha fought her own battles. Corporate headquarters demanded she distance the store from any association with Shirley or Christopher. "They want me to issue a statement saying she was just a temporary employee," Martha said, her voice thick with disgust. As if 5 years of loyal service meant nothing. The impact rippled through the community. Small business owners who had contracts with Warren Enterprises found themselves under scrutiny. The local diner where Shirley sometimes worked extra shifts removed her photo from their employee wall. The apartment complex where she and Judy had lived quickly rented out their old unit, disposing of any belongings left behind. Christopher watched it all with growing anger, particularly the effect on Judy. The bright, resilient child became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped raising her hand in class, though she still knew all the answers. During hospital visits, she tried too hard to be cheerful, her forced smile breaking his heart. One afternoon, he picked her up from school early, finding her hiding in the library with tears streaking her face. "Amanda said Mom got sick because she's bad," Judy whispered. She said bad things happen to bad people, and that's why you lost your family too. That evening, Christopher called an emergency meeting with his remaining loyal employees. Enough is enough, he declared. We can't control the investigation or the media, but we can control how we respond to this crisis. Maria, who had stayed despite offers from competitors, organized a support network among company employees. The maintenance staff from Warren Enterprises began visiting the hospital during their off hours, providing friendly faces and moral support. The company's IT department set up a video conferencing system in Shirley's room so Judy could talk to her mother during school breaks. But the community's reaction continued to deteriorate. When Christopher tried to attend a school board meeting to address concerns about Judy's treatment, he was asked to leave. "We can't have this kind of disruption," the principal explained nervously. "Parents are threatening to withdraw their children." The hospital board scheduled a review of Shirley's case, citing resource allocation concerns despite Dr. Chen's passionate defense of her treatment plan. They recommended transferring her to a lower-cost facility. The implications were clear. They wanted to distance themselves from the Warren scandal. Judy's class was planning their annual science fair, a project she had been excited about for months. Her entry, a presentation about autoimmune diseases and treatment options, was quietly removed from the roster. "We feel it might be too controversial," her teacher explained, not meeting Christopher's eyes. The final blow came when the hospital's charitable foundation, which had initially agreed to help cover some of Shirley's treatment costs, withdrew their support. "We have to protect our reputation," the foundation director stated firmly. "We can't risk our other fundraising relationships." Standing in Shirley's hospital room that evening, watching Judy carefully arrange get-well cards she had made herself since her classmates were no longer allowed to send any, Christopher felt something shift inside him. The community's rejection wasn't just about him anymore. It was hurting two innocent people who had already suffered enough. Mr. Warren, Judy's small voice broke through his thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." "Why do people stop being nice when they're scared?" The question, delivered with a child's simple wisdom, struck him profoundly. Looking between Judy's worried face and Shirley's pale form in the hospital bed, Christopher made a decision. If the community wouldn't support them, he would build a new community, one founded on loyalty, compassion, and the courage to stand up for what was right. "People forget sometimes," he answered carefully, "that being kind is more important than being safe. But we're going to remind them." The early morning light filtered through the windows of Christopher's home office as he studied the documents spread across his desk. 5 weeks had passed since Harold's arrest, and each piece of paper represented another thread in the complex web of betrayal. Maria stood nearby, updating him on their latest findings. "We've traced the money trail through 7 different shell companies," she reported, highlighting sections of a financial report. "Harold wasn't working alone. Someone with intimate knowledge of our security protocols helped him access restricted accounts." Christopher picked up a photograph from his desk, a recent board meeting where Harold sat among trusted colleagues. "Check everyone in this picture," he instructed. "Employment histories, financial records, any connection to Sanderson Industries." A soft knock interrupted them. Judy stood in the doorway, already dressed for school in her uniform, her backpack clutched tightly. "Mr. Warren? Amanda's father is on the news again. He's saying mean things about you and Mom." Christopher and Maria exchanged glances. Tom Cooper, the local car dealership magnate, had become one of their most vocal critics, using his regular TV commercials to make thinly veiled accusations about Warren Enterprises. "Don't worry about Mr. Cooper," Christopher assured her, but his mind was already working. "Maria, add Cooper Automotive to the investigation. Let's see who's been whispering in Tom's ear." After dropping Judy at school, Christopher headed to his lawyer's office. The conference room was filled with his remaining loyal executives, each armed with stacks of documents and determination in their eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Christopher began, "we're not just fighting for a company anymore. We're fighting for the truth, for justice, and for the people who depend on us, I need your absolute best work." The team worked tirelessly, piecing together evidence. They discovered that Harold's betrayal went deeper than anyone suspected. He hadn't just sold company secrets, he'd orchestrated a years-long campaign to systematically weaken Warren Enterprises from within. David Chen, their head of cybersecurity who had stayed loyal despite numerous headhunting attempts, made a breakthrough mid-afternoon. Found something he announced, his fingers flying over his keyboard. "Harold's been accessing the system, using old credentials that should have been deactivated years ago." "Whose credentials?" Christopher asked, though something in his gut already knew the answer. "Sarah's," David said quietly. "He used your wife's old login information. The system never flagged it because, well, no one had the heart to delete her account after the accident." The revelation hit Christopher like a physical blow. Harold hadn't just betrayed the company, he'd exploited Sarah's memory to do it. The pain quickly crystallized into renewed determination. While his team worked on the corporate investigation, Christopher focused on another battle. He arranged a meeting with Judge Martinez at a quiet coffee shop away from prying eyes. "The evidence of Harold's fraud is solid," Eleanor assured him, stirring her untouched coffee. "But there's something else going on here, Christopher. Someone's pulling strings to keep those accounts frozen longer than necessary." Sanderson, Christopher suggested, but Eleanor shook her head. "Bigger than that. This goes higher up. Someone wants Warren Enterprises weakened, vulnerable for a takeover. Harold was just a pawn." Back at the office, Maria had more news. "We found a pattern," she reported. "Every time we were close to a major community development project, something would happen to derail it. The homeless shelter, the affordable housing complex, the children's hospital wing, Harold blocked them all." But why? Christopher wondered aloud. Sarah was passionate about those projects. He knew how much they meant to her. "Maybe that was the point," Maria suggested gently. "To destroy everything you and Sarah built together." The investigation expanded, revealing layers of corruption that stunned even the most cynical observers. Harold had cultivated a network of informants throughout the company, playing on their grievances and insecurities. But he'd made one crucial mistake: he'd kept records of everything. Late one night, as Christopher reviewed another set of documents, he received an unexpected call from Martha at Wilson's Pharmacy. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. "I was going through old security footage from when Shirley worked here. There's something you should know about the day she collapsed." The pharmacy's grainy security video showed Shirley organizing inventory when Harold entered the store. They spoke briefly, and though there was no audio, Shirley's distressed body language was clear. Minutes later, she collapsed. "He threatened her," Martha explained. "I was in the back room, but I heard parts of it. He told her to stay away from you, said she'd regret getting involved with the Warren family again." Christopher's hands tightened on his phone. When did this happen? The day before everything went public. She was already sick, but the stress of his threats, it was the last straw. Armed with this new information, Christopher's team moved with renewed purpose. They compiled evidence, tracked money trails, and slowly began to unravel Harold's network of conspirators. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the full scope of the betrayal. But it was Judy who provided the most unexpected breakthrough. During one of their evening homework sessions, she mentioned something that made Christopher pause. "Amanda said her daddy has special meetings in his office every Thursday," she reported, "focused on her math problems, with a man who looks like your brother, the one from the news." "Harold? Are you sure?" "Aha. She said they talk about making you go away so her daddy can buy your buildings cheap." The innocent observation proved to be the key they needed. Investigation of Cooper Automotive's finances revealed a complex partnership with Sanderson Industries, all orchestrated by Harold. But The plan had been to destroy Warren Enterprises' reputation, force a sale at rock-bottom prices, and then rebuild under new ownership, erasing every trace of the company Christopher and Sarah had built together. As the evidence mounted, Christopher felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about saving his company anymore. It was about protecting everything Sarah had believed in: community, compassion, and the responsibility that came with success. "We're going to fight back," he announced to his team. "Not just legally, but in every way that matters. For every project Harold killed, we'll launch 2 more. For every person he hurt, we'll help a dozen. We're going to show this community what Warren Enterprises really stands for." Looking at the photo of Sarah on his desk, Christopher added quietly, "And this time we're going to protect the people who need us most." In the quiet hours after dinner, Christopher's penthouse took on a different atmosphere. The space that had once felt cold and impersonal now resonated with the sounds of life. Tonight, the kitchen island was covered with science textbooks and colorful diagrams as Christopher helped Judy with her homework. "So if the white blood cells are like an army," Judy explained, sketching carefully in her notebook, "then Mum's army got confused and started attacking the wrong things." Christopher nodded, impressed by her understanding. "Exactly. That's why the medicines the doctors are giving her are so important. They help retrain her immune system." The project had started as a simple homework assignment about the human body, but Judy had turned it into a personal mission to understand her mother's illness. Her determination reminded Christopher painfully of Emma, who had approached every school project with the same intense focus. "Mr. Warren," Judy's voice pulled him from his memories. "Can we make this into a presentation for Mum? Maybe it will help her feel less scared about the treatments." In Shirley's hospital room the next day, they set up their makeshift presentation. Judy had decorated her science diagrams with cheerful stickers and encouraging messages. As she explained the immune system to her mother, using Dr. Beans as a visual aid, Christopher watched Shirley's face light up with pride and love. "And see," Mum Judy pointed to her drawing. "The new medicine is like a teacher for your confused army. That's why you have to take it even when it makes you tired." Shirley reached for her daughter's hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "When did you get so smart, sweetheart?" "Mr. Warren helps me study every night," Judy announced. "He knows lots of things. Did you know he can do multiplication in his head?" Later, after Judy had fallen asleep in the visitor's chair, Shirley turned to Christopher. "You didn't have to do all this," she said softly, helping her with homework, making her feel normal despite everything. "I want to," Christopher replied, surprising himself with his honesty. "She reminds me so much of Emma. The way she thinks, how she cares about others." He paused, gathering courage. "I've never told anyone this, but that night in ER, Emma wasn't alone at the end. You were there." Shirley's hands trembled in her lap. "I remember," she whispered. "She was so brave. She asked me to tell her a story to help her not be scared. I told her about a princess who became a doctor and helped people." "That's why you quit nursing, isn't it? Not just the trauma, but the memory." Shirley nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I couldn't save her. I tried so hard, used every skill I had, but I couldn't. And then seeing you arrive too late, your face when we had to tell you, I carried that guilt for years." Christopher moved closer, taking her hand. "You gave my daughter comfort in her final moments. You stayed with her when I couldn't. I never got to thank you for that." Their conversation was interrupted by Judy stirring in her chair, mumbling something about Dr. Beans needing his medicine. Both adults smiled, the heavy moment softening. As days passed, their evening routine evolved. After homework, Christopher would read to Judy from Sarah's old collection of children's book stories that had gathered dust for 5 years. Sometimes, when a particular passage reminded him too much of Emma, his voice would catch. Judy would simply pat his hand and say, "It's okay to be sad sometimes." During hospital visits, Christopher found himself sharing more stories about Sarah and Emma. He told Judy about Emma's dream of becoming a veterinarian, how she would nurse injured birds back to health in their garden. Shirley shared her own memories of nursing school, the challenges and triumphs that had led her to emergency medicine. One evening, as Christopher was tucking Judy into bed, she asked the question he'd been dreading, "Do you think Emma would have liked me?" He sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Emma would have loved you," he said finally. "You two are alike in so many ways: your kindness, your curiosity, your big heart." "Then maybe," Judy suggested sleepily, "she helped send me and Mum to you, because she knew you were lonely." The simple statement hit Christopher with unexpected force. He stayed in the doorway long after Judy had fallen asleep, contemplating how this child had managed to see through all his carefully constructed walls. During their weekend visits to Balboa Park, Christopher found himself rediscovering the world through Judy's eyes. She pointed out things he'd stopped noticing years ago: the way sunlight dappled through leaves, the intricate patterns of spider webs, the different songs of birds. Her wonder at simple things began to awaken something long dormant in his heart. Shirley's recovery was slow but steady. On good days, they would bring her work from the hospital's medical library, journals and research papers about new treatments. Christopher noticed how her eyes lit up when discussing medical procedures, how her hands would unconsciously mime the motions of providing care. "You miss it, don't you?" he asked one afternoon, watching her review a case study. "Being a nurse." "More than I thought possible," she admitted. "But after Emma, I couldn't trust myself anymore. What if I failed another child?" "You didn't fail Emma," Christopher said firmly. "You gave her peace when she needed it most. That's not failure, that's the highest form of caring." As their bonds grew stronger, Christopher began to realize that healing wasn't just about medicine or money. It was about trust, understanding, and the courage to let people into your heart again. Through Judy's innocent wisdom and Shirley's quiet strength, he was learning to feel again, to care again, to live again. The first signs of escalating trouble came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Christopher arrived at his office to find federal agents waiting in the lobby, armed with search warrants and grim expressions. As they began combing through company records, Maria rushed in with more disturbing news. "Harold's been released on bail," she reported, her face tense, "and he's talking to the press. He's claiming you knew about the offshore accounts all along, that they were your idea." The media frenzy intensified. Local news stations ran special reports questioning Christopher's involvement in the financial scandal. Pictures of him with Judy at the park were twisted into sinister implications about using a sick child for publicity. Outside his office building, protesters carried signs demanding justice for defrauded investors. At the hospital, Shirley's condition took an alarming turn. The stress of constant media attention and reduced treatment options had taken its toll. Dr. Chen found Christopher in the hallway, his usually calm demeanor shaken. "Her body is rejecting the standard medications," he explained quietly. "Without the specialized treatment we had to discontinue. I'm not sure how much longer we can maintain stability." Shirley tried to put on a brave face during Judy's visits, but the strain showed in her increasingly shallow breathing and trembling hands. One afternoon, when she thought no one was watching, she pulled Christopher aside. "If anything happens to me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't," Christopher interrupted. "We're not having this conversation." "We have to," she insisted. "Judy needs someone strong, someone who can provide for her future. These medical bills, they're drowning us both. You have to protect yourself, your company." Before Christopher could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. The SEC was expanding their investigation, freezing additional accounts. Even his personal assets were now under scrutiny. That evening, returning to the penthouse, Christopher found Judy sitting in the dark, clutching Dr. Beans. She'd overheard other students talking about the morning news. "Are they going to take you away?" she asked, her small voice trembling. Amanda said her daddy told her you're going to jail, just like your brother. Christopher knelt before her, heart breaking at the fear in her eyes. No one's taking me away, he promised. But things might get a little harder for a while. Are you brave enough to handle that? Judy nodded solemnly. Mom says we're stronger together, like her white blood cells when they're working properly. The next morning brought more challenges. The hospital board called an emergency meeting to discuss Shirley's case. Despite Dr. Chen's passionate defense, they voted to transfer her to a standard care facility, one without the specialized equipment her condition required. Harold's attacks grew more personal. He gave interviews describing Christopher as a broken man, unhinged by grief, making irrational decisions that threatened the company's future. He painted himself as the loyal brother-in-law, trying to protect Sarah's legacy from her husband's mental decline. The pressure mounted at every level. Christopher's remaining loyal executives faced constant harassment. Anonymous threats were made against anyone who continued supporting Warren Enterprises. Major clients began pulling their contracts, afraid of being tainted by association. Even Judge Martinez was feeling the heat. Someone's been investigating my connection to Sarah, she warned during a hurried phone call. They're trying to force me to recuse myself from any decisions involving the company. Christopher, be careful. This goes deeper than Harold. At Lincoln Elementary, the situation reached a breaking point. The principal called Christopher in for a meeting, explaining awkwardly that Judy's presence was disrupting the school environment. Parents had threatened to withdraw their children, citing safety concerns about association with an ongoing federal investigation. Returning to the hospital that evening, Christopher found Shirley in tears. The nurses had shown her the latest news coverage, pictures of Judy looking lost and afraid at school, headlines questioning Christopher's motives for helping them. "We're destroying your life," Shirley sobbed. "Everything you've built, your reputation, your company, it's all falling apart because of us." "No," Christopher said firmly, taking her hand. "It's falling apart because my brother-in-law chose revenge over family. But we're going to fix this, together." Just then, his phone rang the hospital's security desk. Federal agents were in the lobby, armed with subpoenas. They wanted to question Shirley about her connection to Warren Enterprises, suggesting she might have been involved in the financial fraud. As Christopher hung up, he saw Judy watching from the doorway, her face pale but determined. She crossed to her mother's bed, climbing up carefully. "Remember what you told me about being scared?" she asked Shirley. "You said it's okay to be scared as long as you don't let it stop you from doing what's right." Looking between mother and daughter, Christopher felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. He'd lost one family to circumstances beyond his control. He wouldn't lose another to corporate greed and revenge. His phone buzzed again, Maria, with more bad news. The board was calling for his temporary resignation. Harold had convinced them it was the only way to salvage the company's reputation. But watching Judy comfort her mother, Christopher found new strength. The game had changed. This wasn't about money or power anymore. It was about protecting the people who had brought meaning back into his life. "Whatever happens," he told them quietly, "we face it together. That's what families do." The first sign of change came from an unexpected source. Martha Thompson, still working at Wilson's Pharmacy, organized a small gathering of Shirley's former co-workers in the hospital cafeteria. What started as a simple show of support grew into something larger when hospital staff began stopping by during their breaks. "I remember Nurse Mitchell, an elderly orderly, told the growing crowd. 5 years ago, she saved my grandson after a bad asthma attack, stayed past her shift, called specialists, wouldn't give up until he could breathe properly again." Others stepped forward with similar stories. A cafeteria worker recalled how Shirley would share her lunch with homeless patients. A security guard remembered her working double shifts during a major flu outbreak, sleeping on break room couches between rounds. The stories spread through the hospital like ripples in a pond. Soon, off-duty nurses began volunteering to monitor Shirley's condition. Laboratory technicians found extra testing supplies. Physical therapists offered free sessions during their lunch breaks. Dr. Chen, emboldened by this grassroots movement, challenged the hospital board's decision to transfer Shirley. "If you want to discuss resource allocation," he declared during an emergency meeting, "let's talk about the millions this hospital saved because of Nurse Mitchell's dedication. How many lives she saved, how many lawsuits she prevented through her exceptional care." At Lincoln Elementary, a similar transformation was taking place. Mrs. Reynolds, the librarian who had initially distanced herself from Judy, found her courage after witnessing a particularly cruel bullying incident. "Amanda Cooper," she announced, her quiet voice carrying across the library. "I knew your mother in high school. She was a lot like Judy, kind, smart, often picked on by girls who felt threatened by her intelligence. I wonder what she'd think about her daughter becoming the very thing she once feared." The next day, several teachers began eating lunch with Judy, sharing stories about their own experiences with bullying and resilience. Ms. Thompson, her science teacher, turned Judy's research on autoimmune diseases into a class project, helping students understand the importance of community support in healing. The change spread to local businesses. The diner where Shirley had worked part-time put up a donation jar matched by the owner. The convenience store near their old apartment started a wall of support, covered with messages and small gifts from regular customers who remembered Shirley's kindness. Even some of Warren Enterprises employees who had initially stayed silent began speaking out. Maintenance workers shared stories about Christopher's personal involvement in community projects. Security guards testified about his late-night visits to construction sites, ensuring worker safety regulations were followed. Maria organized these growing supporters into a formal network. She created a schedule ensuring Judy always had rides to school and hospital visits. Local restaurants took turns providing meals. A group of retired teachers offered free tutoring services. The apartment complex that had so quickly rented out Shirley's old unit faced unexpected resistance when residents learned the full story. Led by old Mrs. Peterson, whom Judy had often helped with groceries, tenants threatened to move out unless management helped recover and store the Mitchells' belongings. One morning, Christopher arrived at the hospital to find a group of construction workers in the parking lot. They were from the affordable housing project that Harold had blocked men and women who had lost jobs when the development was cancelled. "We heard what really happened," their foreman explained. "How your brother-in-law stopped the project, not you. We want to help. Maybe we can't build houses right now, but we can make sure people know the truth." They began holding peaceful demonstrations outside the hospital, countering the protesters who questioned Christopher's motives. Their signs told a different story: Warren builds communities and stand with Shirley. Local small business owners, many of whom had benefited from Warren Enterprises' fair leasing practices, started speaking to the media. They shared stories about Christopher's flexibility during hard times, his willingness to renegotiate terms to keep family businesses alive. The tide began to turn at the school as well. Parents who had initially demanded Judy's removal started questioning the narrative they'd been fed. One mother, after seeing her daughter carefully avoiding Judy at recess, remembered how Shirley had stayed late at the hospital when her son needed emergency surgery. "We're teaching our children the wrong lesson," she announced at a PTA meeting. "Instead of showing them how to support someone in crisis, we're teaching them to abandon friends when times get tough." The community's awakening conscience found its voice in unexpected places. A local blog run by a former patient of Shirley's went viral with a post titled "The Nurse Who Saved My Life and How We Failed Her." Small acts of kindness multiplied: anonymous gift cards left at the hospital, care packages delivered to Christopher's office, letters of support flooding the local newspaper. Martha's Pharmacy initiative grew into a full-scale support campaign. Former patients organized fundraisers. Medical supply companies, remembering Shirley's careful inventory management that had saved them thousands, donated equipment and medications. Dr. Chen found himself leading an informal coalition of healthcare workers advocating for Shirley's continued treatment. They presented the hospital board with a petition signed by hundreds of staff members, arguing that abandoning a former colleague in her time of need violated everything the hospital claimed to stand for. For Judy, the change was gradual but profound. Students who had once avoided her began sitting with her at lunch. Amanda Cooper, following a long conversation with her mother, made a halting but sincere apology. The school's science fair committee reinstated her project, now supported by actual medical professionals who volunteered to help with research. Christopher watched this transformation with a mixture of gratitude and humility. The community he'd thought had abandoned them was finding its conscience, its compassion, its voice. In standing up for Shirley and Judy, people were rediscovering their own capacity for kindness. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening. David Chen, working late in the cybersecurity office, discovered an anomaly in the company's backup servers. Hidden beneath layers of encrypted data were email exchanges between Harold and executives at Sanderson Industries dating back 3 years before Sarah and Emma's accident. "Look at this," David called Christopher, his voice tense with urgency. Harold was planning the takeover long before the accident. He was setting up shadow accounts, creating backdoors in our security systems. Christopher sat at his desk, reading through printouts of the recovered emails. Each page revealed a deeper level of betrayal. Harold hadn't just exploited Sarah's death, he'd been laying groundwork for the company's destruction while she was still alive. Maria burst into the office, clutching a stack of documents. "We found something in the old security footage," she announced, the night of the accident. Harold was at the office. He accessed Sarah's computer using her credentials. The security video showed Harold entering the building late that night, his movements furtive. He spent hours at Sarah's computer, downloading files, transferring data. The timestamp showed he was there when the police called about the accident. He knew, Christopher whispered, watching the footage. He knew they were gone, and his first action was to steal company data. Further investigation revealed more disturbing details. Harold had systematically undermined Sarah's community development projects, redirecting funds through a complex network of shell companies. The children's hospital wing she'd dreamed of building, the affordable housing projects she'd championed, all sabotaged from within. Judge Martinez provided another crucial piece of the puzzle. "I've been reviewing Sarah's old legal files," she reported during a confidential meeting. The week before the accident, she discovered financial irregularities in the company's charitable foundation. She was planning to confront Harold about missing funds. The revelation hit Christopher like a physical blow. Sarah had known something was wrong, had been trying to protect their company's mission. Her final message to him, a voicemail he'd never fully listened to, suddenly took on new meaning. With trembling hands, he played the message again. "Chris, we need to talk about the foundation. Something's not right with the numbers. Harold's been. I'll explain at home. Just be careful who you trust. I love you." Working through the night, Christopher's team pieced together a damning timeline. Harold's betrayal wasn't just about money or power. It was a calculated dismantling of everything Sarah had built and believed in. A former Sanderson Industries employee, motivated by conscience, came forward with internal memos. They detailed Harold's promises to destroy Warren Enterprises from within, using his position as Sarah's brother to avoid suspicion. "He told us you were unstable after the accident," the whistleblower explained. "Said you were running the company into the ground, that he was trying to save his sister's legacy. But the things he wanted us to do, it went beyond business." The hospital's own investigation added another layer. Security footage from the emergency room the night of the accident showed Harold arriving before Christopher, speaking privately with administrators. Records indicated he'd attempted to influence the official report of Sarah and Emma's deaths. Martha from Wilson's Pharmacy provided another crucial link. "The day Shirley collapsed, I found these in the trash," she said, handing over crumpled papers. They were printouts of old hospital records, the emergency room reports from the night Sarah and Emma died. Harold was threatening her with these, Martha explained. Said if she didn't stay away from you, he'd make sure everyone knew she failed to save them. He knew exactly how to hurt her worst. The evidence mounted forged documents, manipulated records, years of careful sabotage disguised as business decisions. Harold hadn't just betrayed the company, he'd betrayed his own sister's memory, using her death as a weapon. Tom Cooper, facing pressure from his own board over his connection to the scandal, finally broke. In a sworn statement, he revealed how Harold had manipulated him, using old grudges and false promises to turn him against Christopher. He showed me documents proving Warren Enterprises was failing, Cooper admitted. Said if I helped discredit Christopher, I'd get preferential treatment when Sanderson took over. I never knew, never thought he'd use a sick woman and her child as pawns. The final piece fell into place when Dr. Chen discovered something in Shirley's old personnel file. The night Sarah and Emma died, Shirley had filed a detailed report questioning the response time of certain emergency procedures. The report had been buried, marked reviewed and dismissed under Harold's signature. She suspected something wasn't right, Dr. Chen explained. The way the emergency calls were routed, how long it took for help to arrive. She was asking questions Harold didn't want answered. As Christopher read through Shirley's old report, her words painted a picture of that night that differed significantly from the official version. The delays, the missing equipment, the unusual routing of emergency responses all could be traced back to decisions made by hospital administrators under Harold's influence. The truth was darker than anyone had imagined. Harold hadn't just taken advantage of tragedy, he'd helped orchestrate circumstances that made it worse, using the chaos to begin his takeover plans. In his office, surrounded by evidence of his brother-in-law's betrayal, Christopher felt a strange sense of clarity. The truth wouldn't bring Sarah and Emma back, but it could prevent Harold from destroying anything else they had loved. The evening after the truth about Harold emerged, Christopher found himself in Sarah's old study, a room he hadn't entered in 5 years. Dust covered the furniture, but everything remained exactly as she'd left it, her reading glasses on the desk, sticky notes with her handwriting decorating the computer monitor, family photos lining the walls. Judy found him there, sitting in Sarah's chair, holding a framed photo of his lost family. Without a word, she climbed onto his lap, something she'd never done before. "It's okay to miss them," she said softly, touching the photograph. "Mum says the people we love never really leave us. They just become part of who we are." Christopher felt tears falling for the first time since the funeral. "I tried so hard not to feel anything," he confessed. "I thought if I worked enough, succeeded enough, the pain would go away." Did it? Did it? No, it just made me forget how to live. Shirley's recovery had reached a crucial phase. The community support had helped restore her access to specialized treatment, but years of neglecting her health had taken their toll. During one of her stronger days, she asked Christopher to sit with her while Judy was at school. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice steady despite her weakness. "That night with Sarah and Emma, I've carried the guilt for so long, believing I failed them." "Failed you?" "Surely you didn't?" "Tay." She held up her hand. "Let me finish. I realized something watching you with Judy. We can't change the past, but we can choose how it shapes us. You're not the only one who needs to learn to live again." Over the following weeks, as the legal battles continued, something began to shift in all their lives. Christopher found himself laughing at Judy's jokes, genuinely enjoying their evening homework sessions. The frozen parts of his heart began to thaw. At the hospital, Shirley started talking about returning to nursing. Not in the emergency room, that wound was still too raw, but perhaps in pediatric care, helping children like Emma had needed help. "I thought quitting was protecting my heart," she told Christopher, "but watching you learn to care again, it showed me that protecting yourself from pain means protecting yourself from love too." Judy flourished under the stability of their unconventional family arrangement. Her science project on autoimmune diseases won first place at the school fair, her presentation moving several judges to tears as she explained how community support aided healing. One weekend, Christopher took them to the cemetery. He hadn't visited Sarah and Emma's graves since the funeral, but something told him it was time. Judy brought flowers she'd picked herself, arranging them carefully on both headstones. "Hi Emma," she said softly. "I'm Judy. I hope it's okay that your dad helps take care of me and my mum now. We're trying to take care of him too." Standing there, Christopher felt decades of grief and guilt begin to lift. Sarah wouldn't have wanted him to stop living. Emma wouldn't have wanted him to stop loving. The transformation wasn't just personal. Christopher began reinstating Sarah's community projects, but with new insight gained from his experiences, the Children's Hospital wing would now include a special unit for families facing long-term illnesses. The affordable housing project would prioritize single-parent families. But during board meetings, he no longer focused solely on profit margins. He spoke about corporate responsibility, community impact, the human cost of business decisions. Many were surprised to see the return of the passionate leader they'd thought lost forever. Shirley's recovery became a model for patient care at the hospital. Dr. Chen used her case to demonstrate the importance of treating the whole person, not just the disease. Her experience led to new protocols for supporting healthcare workers dealing with trauma. Even Maria noticed the change in her boss. "You're different," she observed one morning. "Not just kinder or more engaged, you seem peaceful." "I spent 5 years trying to fill the void with success," Christopher replied. "It took losing everything to realize what really matters." The breakthrough came during one of their regular family dinners, a tradition that had evolved naturally. Judy was explaining her latest science experiment, Shirley was discussing her physical therapy progress, and Christopher found himself thinking not of what he'd lost, but of what he'd found. "We're quite a trio, aren't we?" Shirley said, catching his expression. "All a bit broken, all healing together." "Not broken," Christopher corrected, "just finding a new way to be whole." The healing wasn't always smooth. There were still nights when Christopher woke from nightmares about the accident, days when Shirley struggled with her recovery, moments when Judy missed their old life. But they faced these challenges together, drawing strength from their shared understanding of loss and renewal. In Sarah's study, now cleaned and reopened, Christopher found her old journal. The last entry, written the day of the accident, read, "Love isn't about holding on to what we have. It's about having the courage to keep our hearts open, no matter what we lose." Reading those words, Christopher finally understood. He hadn't betrayed Sarah's memory by letting Shirley and Judy into his life. He'd honored it by remembering how to love again. The crisis began without warning on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Christopher and Judy were visiting Shirley, sharing stories about Judy's latest science experiment, when the monitors suddenly began blaring. Shirley's face had gone pale, her breathing labored. Dr. Chen burst into the room, quickly assessing the situation. "Her body's rejecting the treatment," he announced, his voice tense. "We need to start emergency protocols now." The next few hours became a blur of medical terminology and urgent decisions. The specialized medications that had been keeping Shirley stable were no longer effective. Her immune system, already compromised, was launching a full-scale attack against itself. "We need to transfer her to the ICU," Dr. Chen explained to Christopher in the hallway, while nurses prepared Shirley for the move. "But there's a complication, the new treatment protocol we need. It's still under review by the hospital board, without immediate approval." Christopher understood the implication. The treatment was expensive, experimental, and not covered by standard insurance. With his account still frozen and the hospital under scrutiny, getting approval would be nearly impossible. "How long does she have without it?" he asked, watching through the window as Shirley tried to smile at Judy despite her obvious pain. "Hours, maybe a day." Dr. Chen's face was grim. "Her system is crashing. The standard treatments aren't enough anymore. In the ICU waiting room, Judy sat clutching Dr. Beans, her small face tight with worry. "Is Mum going to die?" she whispered when Christopher sat beside her, like Emma did. The question hit him like a physical blow. Before he could answer, his phone rang, the hospital administrator requesting his immediate presence in the boardroom. The scene that greeted him was coldly formal. Board members sat around a long table, their faces carefully neutral as they reviewed Shirley's case. "Mr. Warren," the chairman began, "we sympathize with your situation. However, given the ongoing investigation into your company's finances and the questionable nature of your relationship with the patient." "Questionable?" Christopher interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "She's a former nurse who tried to save my family. Her daughter is under my guardianship. What exactly are you questioning?" The discussion deteriorated from there. The board cited liability concerns, budget constraints, and the risk of appearing to show favoritism. Every minute spent arguing was another minute Shirley's condition worsened. Back in the ICU, Dr. Chen was trying everything possible within the approved protocols. Nothing worked. Shirley's vital signs continued to decline, her body betraying her despite everyone's best efforts. "There might be one option," Dr. Chen suggested hesitantly. "A private research hospital in Los Angeles has the treatment protocol already approved. If we could transfer her." But the logistics proved impossible. Shirley was too unstable to move. The specialized medications needed to be administered immediately, not after a lengthy transfer process. Christopher made desperate calls to every contact he had. Judge Martinez tried to expedite an emergency hearing to release some funds. Maria reached out to pharmaceutical companies about compassionate use programs. Even Tom Cooper, feeling guilty about his role in the scandal, offered to help. Nothing moved fast enough. The hospital board remained entrenched in their position, hiding behind policies and procedures, while a woman's life hung in the balance. In Shirley's ICU room, Judy refused to leave her mother's side. She read aloud from her science textbook, explaining to her unconscious mother how the immune system was supposed to work, as if understanding the process could somehow make it function correctly. The hospital chapel became Christopher's refuge during brief breaks. Sitting in the quiet space, he found himself doing something he hadn't done since losing Sarah and Emma, praying. Not for a miracle, but for the strength to face whatever came next. Dr. Chen worked tirelessly, calling in favors from colleagues, trying experimental combinations of approved medications. But Shirley's condition continued its relentless decline. "We're losing her," he told Christopher honestly. "Without the new treatment protocol, I don't see how we can turn this around." The cruelest part was knowing the treatment existed, was available, but remained just out of reach due to bureaucracy and suspicion. The same hospital that had once celebrated Shirley as an outstanding nurse was now letting her slip away. Judy, showing wisdom beyond her years, organized her own form of protest. She set up a small desk outside the boardroom, doing her homework there while wearing her future doctor t-shirt. When board members passed by, she politely asked them if they remembered her mother helping their families. The media got wind of the situation. Local news stations began running stories about a dedicated nurse being denied treatment by the hospital she'd served faithfully for years. But public opinion couldn't move fast enough to save Shirley. As evening approached, Christopher found himself facing an impossible choice. He could respect the hospital's decision and watch Shirley die, or he could take desperate measures that might save her but would certainly result in his arrest. Standing at Shirley's bedside, watching her struggle for each breath, he remembered Sarah's last message about doing what was right. He thought about Emma, about how Shirley had stayed with her until the end. He looked at Judy, who trusted him to protect her mother. The choice, when it came down to it, wasn't really a choice at all. While Shirley fought for her life in the ICU, Christopher's world continued to crumble on another front. The emergency board meeting was called at dawn. the downtown office building surrounded by media vans and protesters. Harold stood at the head of the conference table, his composed exterior masking a triumph 5 years in the making. The evidence is clear, he announced to the assembled board members. Christopher Warren's emotional instability and questionable financial decisions have put this company at risk. We have no choice but to act. The presentation that followed was devastating in its thoroughness. Harold had prepared for this moment meticulously, weaving truth and lies into an unassailable narrative. Every charitable project Christopher had approved, every community initiative he'd supported, was presented as evidence of fiscal irresponsibility. Look at these numbers, Harold continued, displaying charts of declining profits. While our competitors focused on growth, Warren Enterprises has hemorrhaged money on social programs. The Children's Hospital wing alone would have cost millions that could have been invested in profitable developments. Board members shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke up. The recent scandal had made them wary, and Harold's argument played to their fears. Better to distance themselves from Christopher now than risk going down with him. Maria sat in the corner, furiously taking notes and sending updates to Christopher at the hospital. Each message felt like another nail in the coffin of the company he and Sarah had built together. Furthermore, Harold pressed his advantage, his recent behavior taking in a strange child, spending company resources on unauthorized medical care shows a dangerous lack of judgment. He's letting personal emotions override business sense. The vote, when it came, was almost unanimous. Christopher Warren was to be immediately removed as CEO of Warren Enterprises. Harold would assume temporary control pending a full investigation. Within hours, security teams were changing locks and passwords throughout the building. Longtime employees watched in shock as their files were seized, their computers locked. The company's mission statement, building communities, not just buildings, was quickly removed from the lobby wall. Tom Cooper, attending the meeting as a major stakeholder, finally found his voice. "This isn't right," he protested. "Christopher built this company on principles of community service. You can't just erase that." "The market doesn't run on principles," Harold replied coldly. "It runs on profit." Sarah understood that, even if her husband didn't. The mention of Sarah's name caused several board members to flinch. They remembered her passion for combining business success with social responsibility. But Harold quickly redirected their attention to spreadsheets and profit projections. And by midday, Sanderson Industries representatives were touring the offices, already planning the merger. Harold led them proudly, pointing out areas for efficiency improvements, code for the massive layoffs everyone knew were coming. Maria watched from her desk as employees began packing their personal items. The Human Resources Department was already preparing severance packages for those deemed redundant under the new regime. The Community Development Department was the first to go. Projects that had been years in planning were cancelled with a few keystrokes. Partnerships with local organizations were terminated. The Affordable Housing Initiative was immediately shelved. In the legal department, young lawyers who had joined the company specifically for its commitment to social justice found their cases reassigned or dismissed. Pro bono work was eliminated. Community outreach programs were shut down. The changes rippled through the city. Small businesses that had depended on Warren Enterprises' fair leasing practices received notices of rate increases. Non-profit organizations learned their support was being cut. The Children's Hospital wing project was officially cancelled. Harold moved into Christopher's office before the day was over, immediately taking down the family photos that had decorated the walls. Sarah's face disappeared into a cardboard box, along with every trace of the company's founding principles. The press release went out at closing bell. Warren Enterprises announces new direction. Under strong leadership, the stock price rose sharply as investors anticipated a more business-focused approach. But in quiet corners of the building, loyal employees gathered to share stories. They remembered Christopher staying late to help janitors' children with college applications. They talked about how he had supported staff through personal crises, never asking for repayment. The maintenance crew recalled his insistence on safety over speed, even when it cost more. Security guards remembered him learning their names, asking about their families. The cafeteria workers spoke of his respect for everyone, regardless of position. These stories reached the hospital, where Christopher sat by Shirley's bedside, reading the messages about his company's dismantling. Each update felt like watching a loved one die, which she realized with bitter irony was exactly what was happening on both fronts. Harold's victory seemed complete. He had the board's support, the market's approval, and public opinion largely on his side. The empire Christopher and Sarah had built together was being systematically stripped of everything that had made it special. Yet even as his professional world collapsed, Christopher found his priorities had shifted. Watching Judy do her homework in the ICU, listening to Shirley's labored breathing, he understood that some things mattered more than corporate success. The breaking point came at midnight in Shirley's ICU room. The monitors beeped steadily, marking each precious heartbeat, while the city lights twinkled indifferently through the windows. Judy had finally fallen asleep in the visitor's chair, Dr. Beans clutched tightly against her chest. Christopher sat watching both of them, the weight of multiple failures pressing down on him. The company he'd built with Sarah was gone. The treatment Shirley desperately needed remained out of reach. And Judy, innocent, trusting Judy, was about to lose everything all over again. Shirley stirred, her eyes opening with obvious effort. "Christopher," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the medical equipment. "You have to promise me something." He leaned closer, taking her trembling hand. "Anything." "Let me go," the words hung in the air between them. "You've lost too much already. The company, your reputation. I won't let you lose everything trying to save me." "Shirley, don't." "Listen," she interrupted, each word a struggle. "Judy needs someone strong, someone who can give her a future. If you keep fighting for me, they'll take everything. Harold will win. And then who will protect her?" The truth of her words cut deep. The hospital board was watching his every move. One wrong step, one desperate action, and he could lose his guardianship of Judy. Harold would make sure of that. As if sensing their discussion, Judy stirred in her sleep. "Mom," she called out softly, caught in some troubled dream. "Don't leave." Shirley's face crumpled with pain that had nothing to do with her physical condition. "My brave girl," she whispered. "I never wanted to leave you, just like your father." "What about her father?" Christopher asked, suddenly alert. It was a topic Shirley had always avoided. "He was a doctor," Shirley admitted, her voice fading. "When he learned about my pregnancy, he said he couldn't risk his career on a scandal. His family was prominent, his future secured. I was just a nurse." The revelation added another layer to Shirley's reluctance to accept help, her fierce independence. She'd been abandoned once before by someone who should have protected her. Judy woke fully then, immediately sensing the tension in the room. Her eyes darted between her mother's pale face and Christopher's troubled expression. "What's wrong, Mum?" "Mr. Warren." Neither adult answered immediately. How could they explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes love wasn't enough, that sometimes the world's cruelty overwhelmed even the strongest hearts? "It's my fault," Judy said suddenly, tears filling her eyes. "If I hadn't gotten lost in the park, if I hadn't made Mr. Warren help us, none of this would have happened. Mom would be okay, and Mr. Warren would still have his company." "No," sweetheart Shirley tried to reach for her daughter, but the movement triggered a coughing fit. The monitors began beeping more urgently. Christopher gathered Judy into his arms as nurses rushed in to stabilize Shirley. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "None of this is your fault. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and it's not because of anything they did." "Then why?" Judy's voice cracked. "Why won't they help Mum? Why did Mr. Harold hurt your company? Why does Amanda's dad say mean things about us on TV? The questions had no easy answers. Outside the ICU, the hospital continued its routine. Somewhere in the city, Harold was probably celebrating his victory in Christopher's former office. The world moved on, indifferent to their private tragedy. Dr. Chen entered after the nurses had settled Shirley. His face carried the weight of more bad news. The latest blood work he began, then stopped, looking at Judy. "She deserves to know," Shirley said weakly. "She's stronger than anyone realizes." But the doctor nodded. "The infection is spreading. Without the specialized treatment, I'd say we have less than 24 hours. Judy's small body began shaking. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no," she pulled away from Christopher, from all of them, backing into a corner with Dr. Beans pressed against her face. "I hate you," she suddenly screamed, the sound shocking in the quiet room. "I hate the hospital. I hate Mr. Harold. I hate everyone who won't help. I hate." Her voice broke into sobs. "I hate that I can't do anything." Christopher felt something break inside him. He'd watched helplessly as Sarah and Emma were taken from him. Now history was repeating itself, and once again he seemed powerless to prevent it. Shirley's voice came soft but clear. "Christopher, let me go. Take care of Judy. Give her the life I couldn't." "Mom, no," Judy rushed back to the bed. "You can't give up. You always said we never give up." But Shirley's eyes were closing, her strength fading. The monitors showed her vital signs slowly deteriorating. Dr. Chen moved to adjust her medications, knowing it was only delaying the inevitable. Christopher stood at the window, watching his reflection superimposed over the city lights. 5 years ago, he'd stood at another hospital window, feeling this same helplessness. But something was different now. "Dr. Chen," he said quietly, "if we had access to the treatment right now, what are her chances? With immediate intervention, better than 50%. And without it, 0. Christopher looked at Judy, clinging to her mother's hand and singing their special song through her tears. He thought about Sarah, about Emma, about promises made and broken, about what it really meant to save someone. The choice crystallized in his mind. Some things were worth losing everything for. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke over San Diego, matching the tension building in the hospital boardroom. Christopher stood before the assembled board members, his clothes still wrinkled from his vigil in the ICU, but his voice steady and clear. "Before you make your final decision about Shirley's treatment," he began, "there's something you need to see." He nodded to Maria, who connected her laptop to the room's display screen. The first image appeared security footage from the night Sarah and Emma died. Harold's face, 5 years younger but unmistakable, at Sarah's computer. The timestamp showed he was there when the accident occurred. "My brother-in-law didn't just betray the company," Christopher continued. "He betrayed his own sister. While Sarah and Emma were dying, he was stealing company data, setting up the groundwork for everything that followed." The board members shifted uncomfortably as more evidence appeared on screen. Emails between Harold and Sanderson Industries, dating back years before the accident. Financial records showing systematic sabotage of Sarah's community projects. But the complex web of offshore accounts used to hide the money. Dr. Chen stepped forward next, presenting Shirley's original ER report from the night of the accident. MS Mitchell noticed irregularities in the emergency response time, he explained. Calls that were mysteriously rerouted, equipment that should have been available but wasn't. Her report was buried under Harold's authority. Tom Cooper, who had insisted on attending, stood up. "I need to confess something," he announced. "Harold approached me months ago with a plan. He said Christopher was mentally unstable, that he was destroying Sarah's legacy. He promised me prime real estate deals once Sanderson took over. I helped spread lies about Christopher, about his relationship with the Mitchells." The revelation caused a stir among the board members. Cooper was a respected businessman. His admission carried weight. But Martha from Wilson's Pharmacy had brought security footage from the day Shirley collapsed. The video clearly showed Harold threatening her, wielding her old ER report like a weapon. The audio was poor, but his words were clear enough: stay away from Christopher, or everyone will know you let his family die. Judge Martinez arrived next, carrying a sealed envelope. I found this in Sarah's old legal files, she said. It's dated the day before the accident. Inside was a detailed report of financial irregularities Sarah had discovered, all pointing to Harold's early corruption. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. A young intern from Sanderson Industries, trembling but determined, presented emails showing Harold's true plan. He hadn't just wanted to take over Warren Enterprises, he'd wanted to destroy everything Sarah had built, to erase her vision of combining business success with social responsibility. He told us Christopher was the enemy. The intern explained that he was betraying Sarah's memory by wasting money on community projects. But look at the timestamps: he was working against her while she was still alive. The board members listened in growing horror as the full scope of Harold's betrayal became clear. This wasn't just corporate espionage or financial fraud. This was a systematic campaign to destroy a family's legacy, using tragedy as cover for corruption. Maria presented the final piece of evidence: Harold's personal emails to Sanderson executives, gloating about how easily manipulated everyone had been. The accident was perfect timing, he'd written. Christopher was too broken to notice what I was doing, and everyone was too busy pitying the grieving husband to question my actions. The hospital administrator who had blocked Shirley's treatment looked particularly shaken. He told us approving the treatment would look like favoritism, she admitted. Said it would damage the hospital's reputation. We never knew. Christopher raised his hand for silence. I'm not here to assign blame, he said quietly. I'm here to right a wrong. Sarah believed in using success to help others. Shirley Mitchell shares that belief. She proved it every day she worked in your ER, and she's still proving it by worrying more about her daughter's future than her own life. At that moment, Dr. Chen received an urgent message from the ICU. Shirley's condition had deteriorated further. Without immediate intervention, they would lose her within hours. The board chairman stood slowly. Mr. Warren, he said formally, on behalf of the hospital board, I believe we owe you and Ms. Mitchell an apology. The treatment protocol is approved, effective immediately. But Christopher wasn't finished. There's one more thing you need to see, he said, motioning to Maria. The final image appeared on screen, a photograph of Sarah and Shirley together at a hospital fundraiser years before the accident. They were smiling, united in their commitment to helping others. My wife and Ms. Mitchell never met again after that night, Christopher explained, his voice thick with emotion. But they shared the same belief that success means nothing if we don't use it to make a difference in people's lives. The storm outside began to ease as the board members voted unanimously to not only approve Shirley's treatment, but to establish a foundation in Sarah's name, dedicated to helping families facing similar medical crises. The response from the community, once the truth emerged, was swift and powerful. By sunrise the next morning, a line of hospital staff stretched down the hallway outside Shirley's ICU room. Nurses from every department had volunteered to monitor her treatment, many coming in on their days off. Dr. Chen coordinated the medical team with military precision. We have one chance to get this right, he told them during the briefing. Shirley Mitchell saved countless lives in this hospital. Now it's our turn to save hers. The pharmacy department, led by Martha, worked through the night compounding medications. When a critical component of the treatment protocol ran low, local pharmacists across the city opened their supplies, creating a relay system to ensure continuous availability. She helped my son during an asthma attack 5 years ago, one pharmacist explained, delivering precious vials. Stayed 2 hours past her shift until she was sure he could breathe properly. I never forgot that. In the hospital cafeteria, staff organized a round-the-clock support system. Food appeared regularly in the ICU waiting room, where Judy had set up a small homework station. Teachers from Lincoln Elementary took turns tutoring her, ensuring she wouldn't fall behind during the crisis. The maintenance crew from Warren Enterprises arrived in force, offering to repair and upgrade the ICU equipment free of charge. They worked quietly, efficiently, their presence a reminder that true loyalty transcends corporate boundaries. The whole restaurants began delivering meals to the hospital staff, coordinated by the owner of the diner where Shirley had worked part-time. She always made sure our elderly customers got extra attention, he said. Checked their medications, made sure they were eating properly. That's just who she is. The change in public sentiment affected the media coverage as well. Reporters who had sensationalized the Warren Enterprises scandal now focused on the human story, a dedicated nurse who had helped countless families, fighting for her own life while her community rallied around her. Tom Cooper made a public statement, admitting his role in spreading false allegations. His daughter Amanda appeared beside him, tearfully apologizing to Judy for her bullying. "I was wrong," she said directly to the cameras. "Being rich or powerful doesn't make you better than anyone else. Being kind does." The hospital board's revelation about Harold's manipulation sparked a wave of similar confessions. Former employees who had stayed silent out of fear now came forward, sharing stories of how he had threatened and coerced them. But the most powerful response came from the patients and families Shirley had helped over the years. They gathered in the hospital chapel, sharing stories and organizing prayer vigils. Each person had a memory, a moment of kindness, a word of comfort, an extra minute spent explaining a treatment. "She held my hand through my first chemotherapy," one elderly woman recalled. "Told me stories about her daughter to keep my mind off the fear." That's the kind of nurse she was treating the person, not just the disease. A group of local business owners, many of whom had benefited from Warren Enterprises' fair practices, organized a fund to help cover additional expenses. They remembered how Christopher and Sarah had helped them during tough times, offering flexible terms and genuine support. The construction workers from the cancelled housing project returned, but this time to help. They repaired the hospital's aging infrastructure, improved the ICU waiting areas, and created a small garden visible from Shirley's window. "Mr. Warren gave us a chance when no one else would," their foreman explained. "Hired us based on skill, not background. That housing project wasn't just about buildings, it was about believing in people." Inside the ICU, the specialized treatment began showing promising results. Shirley's vital signs stabilized, then slowly began to improve. Dr. Chen maintained a cautious optimism, but the staff couldn't help celebrating each small victory. Judy, surrounded by her impromptu support system, started to smile again. She turned her science project into a journal documenting her mother's treatment, with help from the medical staff who took time to explain each procedure. The hospital gift shop, typically quiet during night shifts, became a hub of activity. People left cards, flowers, and small gifts. More importantly, they left stories, hundreds of them, detailing moments when Shirley had made a difference in their lives. Maria organized these stories into a book, reading them to Shirley during the long hours of treatment. Each story seemed to strengthen her, reminding her of the impact she'd had on her community. Even the hospital administrators who had initially opposed her treatment became advocates. They began developing new protocols for handling similar cases, ensuring that bureaucracy would never again threaten a life that could be saved. The community's response transcended traditional boundaries of class and status. Wealthy donors who had pulled back during the scandal returned, inspired by the true story of corporate responsibility and human compassion. Small business owners contributed what they could, understanding that community strength comes from unity. As Shirley's condition continued to improve, the movement grew beyond her case. People began asking larger questions about healthcare access, corporate responsibility, and the true meaning of community. The crisis had revealed Not just the worst of human nature in Harold's betrayal, but the best in the community's response. Christopher, watching it all from Shirley's bedside, finally understood what Sarah had tried to teach him years ago. True success isn't measured in profits or power, but in the lives you touch and the changes you inspire. The day Harold surrendered himself to the authorities dawned clear and bright over San Diego. He walked into the federal building voluntarily, accompanied by his lawyer and carrying a thick folder of documents. His face, broadcasted across local news stations, showed the weight of his decisions. In the district attorney's office, Harold sat across from Christopher, Judge Martinez presiding over the meeting. The brothers-in-law faced each other for the first time since the truth had emerged. "I need to tell you something," Harold began, his voice hollow. "About the night Sarah and Emma died," he opened the folder, hands trembling. "I knew about the brake problems in Sarah's car. The maintenance report came to my office the day before, but I held it back. I thought delaying the repair would just inconvenience you, force you to miss another deal." The confession hung in the air like poison. Christopher's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, knuckles white with tension. "I never meant." Harold's voice broke. "They weren't supposed to be driving in the rain. The school recital was supposed to be next week. I got the dates mixed up. I never wanted them to." He couldn't finish. Christopher sat in silence, processing this final piece of the tragic puzzle. When he finally spoke, his voice was surprisingly gentle. "Sarah always said you were trapped by your own ambition. She worried about you even at the end." Harold looked up, tears streaming down his face. "I couldn't face what I'd done. It was easier to blame you, to convince myself you'd killed them with your work obsession. Then when I saw you helping the Mitchells, seeing you become the man Sarah always believed you could be, it made everything I'd done even worse." Judge Martinez watched carefully as Christopher stood and walked to the window. "You know what Judy asked me yesterday," he said quietly. "She asked if people can change. If someone does something terrible, can they ever make it right?" "What did you tell her?" Harold whispered. "I told her about Sarah's favorite quote, 'The measure of a person isn't in never falling, but in how they rise after they fall.'" Christopher turned back to face his brother-in-law. "She believed in redemption, Harold. Even at the end, she was trying to save you from yourself." The meeting concluded with Harold signing a full confession, not just to the corporate crimes, but to his role in the accident. As part of his plea agreement, he provided evidence that would help restore Warren Enterprises to Christopher's control and ensure Shirley's continued treatment. Later that afternoon, in Shirley's hospital room, Christopher shared the news with her and Judy. Shirley had progressed enough to sit up, her color slowly returning, though she remained weak. "He admitted everything?" she asked softly, her nurse's compassion evident even now. "Everything," Christopher confirmed. "The company, the accident, the threats against you. He's facing significant prison time, but he's also agreed to testify against others involved in the scheme." Judy, curled up in her usual chair with Dr. Beans, considered this carefully. "Is he sorry? Really sorry?" "I believe he is," Christopher answered thoughtfully. "Sometimes people do terrible things because they're hurting inside. It doesn't excuse what they did, but understanding why helps us learn to forgive." "Like how Mum forgave herself for not saving Emma," Judy asked, showing her remarkable perception, "and how you forgave yourself for not being there." Shirley reached for her daughter's hand, then Christopher's, joining them together. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting," she explained. "It's about choosing to move forward, to build something new from what remains." The moment was interrupted by Maria arriving with more news. The board of Warren Enterprises had voted unanimously to reinstate Christopher as CEO. The company's community development projects would resume immediately, starting with the Children's Hospital Wing, now renamed the Sarah Warren Memorial Wing. As they celebrated this news, Dr. Chen entered with his own update. Shirley's latest test results showed significant improvement. The treatment was working better than expected. You'll need to stay on the medication, he cautioned, but we can start talking about rehabilitation. Maybe even he smiled, returning to nursing if you're interested. The suggestion brought tears to Shirley's eyes. I never thought I'd be able to practice again. After Emma. You were there for my daughter when she needed someone, Christopher said quietly. You gave her peace in her final moments. That's not failure, Shirley. That's the highest form of healing. Judy climbed onto her mother's bed, careful of the IV lines. Does this mean we can be a real family now, she asked. All of us. The adults exchanged glances, years of pain and loss and newfound hope passing between them. Christopher thought about Sarah, about Emma, about all the dreams they'd had for their family. He thought about Harold paying for his mistakes, but perhaps finding his own path to redemption. We already are a family, he said finally. Different from what any of us expected, but maybe that's what makes it special. Spring arrived in San Diego with a burst of color and renewal. 6 months after Harold's confession, the city itself seemed to be healing alongside its residents. The Sarah Warren Memorial Wing at San Diego General was nearing completion, its modern facade gleaming in the morning sun. Inside the hospital's rehabilitation center, Shirley took cautious steps along the parallel bars, her determination evident in every movement. Months of specialized treatment had reversed the worst of her condition, though recovery remained a gradual process. That's excellent progress, Dr. Chen encouraged, monitoring her vital signs. Your body is responding exactly as we hoped. A few more weeks and we can discuss returning to work part-time, at first, of course. Shirley paused to catch her breath, her smile bright despite the exertion. I never thought I'd walk these halls as a nurse again, after everything that happened. The hospital needs nurses like you, Dr. Chen replied firmly. Someone who understands both sides of healing as a caregiver and a patient. In the hospital's new pediatric wing, evidence of recovery appeared in unexpected ways. Judy had transformed her science project about autoimmune diseases into an educational program for young patients. Every Saturday morning, she would visit children undergoing treatment, explaining complex medical concepts through stories and simple drawings. Dr. Beans helps too, she explained seriously to a young cancer patient. He knows all about being scared of medicine. But he also knows that sometimes the things that make us feel worse at first help us get better in the end. The hospital staff watched with quiet amazement as this 8-year-old girl connected with patients in ways they couldn't. She shared her own story of almost losing her mother, of finding a new family in unexpected places, of learning that strength often comes from vulnerability. At Warren Enterprises, recovery took a different form. Christopher's return as CEO brought significant changes. The company's mission statement, building communities, not just buildings, returned to prominence, now accompanied by Sarah's portrait in the lobby. The affordable housing project resumed construction, with additional units specifically designated for medical professionals and their families. The development included a community center named in Shirley's honor, focusing on health education and support services. Tom Cooper, making amends for his role in the scandal, partnered with Warren Enterprises to provide transportation services for patients receiving long-term treatment. His daughter Amanda became a regular volunteer at the hospital, working alongside Judy in the pediatric ward. Harold's prosecution proceeded, but with an unexpected dimension of healing. Rather than seeking maximum punishment, Christopher worked with the district attorney to incorporate rehabilitation and community service into the sentence. Harold would serve time, but he would also contribute to rebuilding what he had tried to destroy. Sarah would have wanted this, Christopher explained to the board members. She always believed in second chances, in the possibility of redemption. The company's recovery extended beyond financial metrics. Employee morale soared as community projects resumed. The maintenance crew took special pride in their work on the hospital wing, adding personal touches that went far beyond the original specifications. Maria organized a mentorship program, pairing experienced employees with local students interested in business and community development. The program, named after Emma, focused particularly on young people facing personal or financial challenges. In the hospital's newly established research department, Dr. Chen led studies on the treatment protocol that had saved Shirley's life. The findings would help other patients with similar conditions, turning a personal victory into hope for many families. Shirley's recovery milestone came on a bright Tuesday morning. Dressed in her nurse's uniform for the first time in years, she stood before the mirror in the staff locker room. Her hand shook slightly as she pinned her badge Shirley Mitchell, RN, to her lapel. "Ready?" Christopher asked from the doorway, Judy bouncing excitedly beside him. Almost Shirley touched the silver heart necklace Christopher had given her, an exact replica of the one Sarah had worn. "I never thought I'd have this chance again, to help people, to make a difference." Her first shift was in the pediatric wing, working alongside many of the nurses who had helped with her own recovery. As she moved from room to room, checking on patients with the same gentle efficiency she'd been known for, staff members stopped to watch. The Mitchell miracle, as they'd taken to calling her recovery, had come full circle. The most profound recovery, however, was less visible but equally meaningful. Christopher, Shirley, and Judy had formed a family unit that honored the past while embracing the future. Their evening dinners became a time for sharing stories about Sarah and Emma, about struggles and triumphs, about the daily miracles of healing and growth. One evening, as they walked through Balboa Park, the place where their journey had begun, Judy spotted a lost child crying near the fountain. Without hesitation, she approached, offering comfort and help finding their parents. "Like father, like daughter," Shirley murmured, watching Judy's natural compassion in action. Christopher squeezed her hand, remembering another lost child, another moment of choice. "No," he corrected gently. "Like mother, like daughter. You both have that gift, seeing someone in pain and choosing to help." The wedding took place in the garden of Sarah and Emma's Memorial Park, a quiet corner of the city that Christopher had developed in their memory. Cherry blossoms floated on the spring breeze as Judy walked down the aisle, scattering rose petals with careful precision, Dr. Beans tucked securely under her arm. Shirley stood beneath an arch of white roses, her nurse's pin gleaming alongside the silver heart necklace. The simple white dress she'd chosen highlighted her recovered strength, while her eyes held a mix of joy and tender understanding. Christopher waited at the altar, his face reflecting a peace that had been years in coming. On his lapel, he wore 2 pins the Warren Enterprises logo Sarah had designed and a tiny caduceus representing Shirley's dedication to healing. Judge Martinez presided over the ceremony, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd of hospital staff, company employees, and community members who had become family through shared trials and triumphs. "Love," she began, "sometimes finds us in our darkest moments. It comes not to erase our past, but to help us build a future from what remains. Today we celebrate not just the union of 2 people, but the formation of a family that proves hope can grow from loss." Judy's role went beyond flower girl. When the time came for vows, she stepped forward, holding a small book she'd created. Inside were pictures and stories of their journey from that first meeting in the park to their current happiness. "Mom," she read clearly, "you taught me that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right even when you're terrified. You never gave up on me, on being a nurse, on living. I promise to make you proud every day." Turning to Christopher, she continued, "You found us when we were lost, not just in the park, but in life. You showed me that family isn't about who you're born to, but who you choose to love. I promise to help you remember how to laugh and to keep Dr. Beans in good medical condition." There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering as Shirley and Christopher exchanged their own vows. They spoke not just to each other, but to the memories that had brought them together. "Christopher. Bye." Shirley's voice was steady despite her tears. "You taught me that helping others isn't a weakness, and accepting help isn't failure. You helped me find my way back to nursing, to life, to love. I promise to honor Sarah's memory by loving you and Judy with the same courage and compassion she showed." Christopher's response came from deep within his healed heart. "Shirley, you and Judy brought light back into my world when I thought all light was gone. Sarah once told me that love multiplies, it doesn't divide. She was right. I promise to cherish the family we built, to honor the past while embracing our future together." The reception that followed felt more like a community celebration than a formal wedding. Hospital staff shared tables with business executives, breaking down the artificial barriers that had once seemed so important. Children from the pediatric ward, whom Judy had befriended during her mother's recovery, played games on the lawn. Dr. Chen gave a toast that captured the moment perfectly. In medicine, we talk about healing bodies. But today we celebrate the healing of hearts, of a family, of a community. Shirley and Christopher remind us that sometimes the best medicine is love. Maria's speech brought both laughter and tears as she recounted the journey from corporate crises to personal triumph. "I watched my boss become human again," she said, "and I watched two lost souls find their way home through each other." The most touching moment came when a letter from Harold was read. From his prison cell, he had written, "Sarah would be proud of the family you've built. She always said love was about adding, never subtracting. Take care of each other. Help others heal as you have healed yourselves." As evening fell, lanterns lit the garden while guests shared stories of how this unlikely family had touched their lives. Amanda Cooper, now one of Judy's closest friends, spoke about learning compassion. Tom Cooper reflected on the meaning of true success. The hospital board chairman announced the establishment of the Mitchell-Warren Scholarship for nursing students, ensuring that Shirley's dedication to healing would inspire future generations. Later, during the first dance, Christopher held his new wife close as their song played the same melody that had often drifted from Sarah's study years ago. But now it carried new meaning, speaking of love's ability to heal and grow. Judy danced with Dr. Beans, teaching other children her special healing dance that she'd invented during her mother's recovery. Her laughter, pure and free, embodied the joy of their new beginning. As the celebration continued, Shirley and Christopher took a quiet moment in the garden. They stood before Sarah and Emma's memorial plaque, hands clasped together. "Do you think they'd understand?" Shirley whispered. Christopher smiled, watching Judy teach a young patient how to make Dr. Beans perform surgery on a teddy bear. "Sarah always said that love was the best medicine for a broken heart. She sent you both to help me remember that." 10 years after the day Christopher found a lost little girl in Balboa Park, San Diego had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The Sarah Warren Memorial Wing had become a model for integrating medical care with community support, its success inspiring similar programs across the country. Shirley, now the hospital's director of patient care services, had revolutionized their approach to treating long-term patients. Her own experience as both nurse and patient led to the creation of the Healing Hearts program, which paired medical treatment with emotional support for families facing extended hospital stays. Every patient has a story, she often told new nurses during orientation. Our job isn't just to treat the illness, but to help write the next chapter of their story. Judy, now 18 and preparing for medical school, had turned her childhood science project into a full-fledged pediatric support program. Dr. Bean's Healing Club operated in hospitals nationwide, helping children understand their illnesses through stories and play. The original Dr. Beans, somewhat worn but still wearing his surgical scrubs, sat proudly in a display case in the pediatric ward. Warren Enterprises had evolved into a model of corporate responsibility. The company's commitment to combining business success with community service inspired a new generation of entrepreneurs. The affordable housing project had expanded to include medical residences, community centers, and educational facilities. Christopher's leadership style had changed profoundly. Board meetings now began with sharing stories of community impact alongside financial reports. The company's motto, "Building Communities, not just buildings," had become a case study in business schools worldwide. Harold, after serving his sentence, found his own path to redemption. Working from a small office in the Sarah Warren Memorial Wing, he managed a foundation supporting families affected by medical crises. His own experience with guilt and forgiveness helped him connect with others struggling to rebuild their lives. The Mitchell-Warren Scholarship Fund had put hundreds of students through nursing school, many of them inspired by Shirley's story. These graduates brought a new understanding of patient care to their work, combining professional expertise with personal compassion. The hospital's research department, led by Dr. Chen, had advanced the treatment protocol that saved Shirley's life, making it accessible to patients worldwide. Their work on autoimmune conditions had opened new avenues for treatment, earning international recognition. Amanda Cooper, following Judy's example, had become a child life specialist, working with young patients in the pediatric ward. Her father's car dealership now operated a free transportation service for patients and their families, turning his business acumen toward community service. Maria had developed the company's mentorship program into a nationwide initiative, connecting successful businesses with community organizations. Her handbook, The Heart of Business Lessons from the Warren Mitchell Story, became required reading in corporate leadership courses. The impact rippled through generations. Children who had been patients in the pediatric ward grew up to become doctors and nurses. Families who had received help through the housing project started their own community support programs. The cycle of healing and giving back continued to grow. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, the family gathered in Balboa Park. The fountain where Judy had once waited, lost and afraid, now bore a plaque where healing begins in memory of Sarah and Emma Warren, inspiring hope through love. Shirley, her nurse's pin catching the sunlight, watched young families enjoying the park. "Sometimes I still can't believe how everything turned out," she said softly. "From that terrible day in the pharmacy to now." Christopher squeezed her hand, his other arm around Judy, who was reading her medical school acceptance letter for the 100th time. Sarah used to say that love was like medicine. It works in mysterious ways, healing things we didn't even know were broken. And sometimes, Judy added, her childhood wisdom now matured but unchanged. The best healing happens when we help others heal. The park had become a symbol of their story of loss and finding, of healing and hope, of building something new from what remained. Regular visitors often noticed the three of them there: the businessman who learned to feel again, the nurse who found her way back to healing, and the little girl who helped them both remember what family really means. Their story became part of the city's fabric, taught in local schools as an example of community resilience. But more importantly, it lived on in countless small acts of kindness, in moments of courage and compassion, in the ongoing choice to help others heal. As the sun set over San Diego, casting the city in golden light, the three of them walked the familiar park paths together. They passed other families, other stories in progress, other moments of healing unfolding in their own time. "Ready to go home?" Christopher asked, though home had long since become more than a place. Shirley and Judy nodded, their steps falling naturally in sync. They had learned that family isn't always what you're born into, sometimes it's what you build together, one healing moment at a time. Dear valued viewers, thank you for joining us for this emotional journey of love, healing, and redemption. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Christopher, Shirley, and Judy's story. What touched you most? How did their journey resonate with your own experiences? Please support our team by subscribing to our channel for more heartwarming stories that celebrate the human spirit. Share this video with friends and family who might find inspiration in this tale of healing and hope. Don't forget to like this video and leave your comments below. Your engagement helps us continue creating meaningful content that touches hearts and reminds us of the power of love and compassion. Together, let's build a community that celebrates stories of resilience and the enduring strength of the human heart. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family.